There are cities built on earth, and there are cities built on time. Some places carry the weight of their centuries so deeply in their foundations that you can feel it when you walk their streets, a gravity that has nothing to do with stone, and everything to do with all the lives that have been lived within those walls. The prayers whispered, the bread broken, children born and old ones buried, layer upon layer of ordinary days, pressed together like pages in a book so ancient that the binding has grown soft. Tonight, we travel to one such city, the greatest city the medieval world ever knew. Constantinople. For 11 centuries, it stood at the edge of Europe and the edge of Asia, where the waters of the Bosphorus run cold and deep between two continents. A city of domes and columns, of gold-backed glass and sea walls worn smooth by the tides. It had survived plague and earthquake, siege and civil war, famine and fire, and had always endured. The walls held. The bells rang. Fishing boats went out each morning into the Sea of Marmara, and the markets opened, and incense rose from 100 churches, and the city breathed. By the spring of 1453, Constantinople had grown quieter. Its population had dwindled from 500,000 to perhaps 50,000. Whole neighborhoods stood empty, their houses crumbling back into gardens. Orchards grew where forums had once echoed with voices. Stray dogs slept in the shade of marble columns that no one polished anymore. And yet, the dome of Hagia Sophia still caught the light at sunset, 900 years old, and still the largest enclosed space in the world. The Theodosian Walls still stretched across the peninsula, their triple layers of stone and mortar scarred but standing, as they had stood since the age of the Roman emperors. The chains still held across the Golden Horn, link upon massive iron link. Fishermen still brought in their silver catch at dawn. Diminished but not gone, not yet. Tonight, we go there on the last evening it would ever be as it was. May the 28th, 1453. A Tuesday in late spring. The roses are in bloom. The air smells of salt water and warm stone and the faintest trace of incense drifting from an open church door. 7 weeks of cannon fire have fallen silent, and the silence, somehow, is worse. So let your eyes close now, if they have not already. Let the day you have lived settle and grow still. Let your breathing slow, the way waves slow when the wind dies down at dusk. We are going to walk together through this city on its last night. Not as historians, not as scholars with dates and figures. Simply as travelers, quiet, unhurried, present. We will feel the cool stone of the sea walls beneath our hands. We will smell bread baking in the communal ovens. We will hear the church bells begin to ring, one by one, calling the faithful to a prayer that will be unlike any prayer this city has ever known. And if you fall asleep along the way, as I hope you will, then you will simply join the sleepers who have rested beneath these stones for 1,000 years. Good company. Come, the sun is setting over the Sea of Marmara. The water has turned to bronze, and somewhere across the city, a single bell is beginning to toll. Word count, ~620. The sun is going down over the Sea of Marmara, and the water has caught the light the way it has caught the light every evening for as long as anyone can remember. Not gold, exactly something deeper, something closer to hammered bronze, the kind of metal you see on the doors of very old churches. The color shifts as the swells move beneath it, brightening where the crests catch the last direct rays, darkening in the troughs where shadow already pools. Far to the south, where the open sea stretches toward the coast of Asia Minor, the horizon is a line of amber slowly bleeding into violet. You are standing on the sea walls, the southern ramparts, where the city meets the Marmara along a coastline of fitted stone that has held against the tides for 1,000 years. Beneath you, the water laps at the base of the fortifications with a sound like breathing, in and out, unhurried and ancient. The stone under your hand is cool despite the warm spring day, rough with salt deposits and the faint grit of centuries. Lower down, where the waves reach at high tide, green-black seaweed clings to the blocks in dark, slippery curtains. The smell rises from it, brine and iodine, and something vegetal, like the sea's own garden growing in the spaces between the stones. The walls here are old. Not the famous Theodosian land walls that stretch across the western peninsula, but older in some sections, patched and repaired so many times that the masonry is a patchwork of eras. Pale limestone from the age of Constantine, the Great beside darker granite blocks added 300 years later. Iron clamps holding together stones that were laid when Rome still ruled from the Tiber. You can read the history of the city, in these, seems the way you might read the rings of a very old tree. Turn and look north now, across the rooftops, and the city reveals itself against the evening sky. From this distance, still one of the most remarkable sights in the world. The skyline is a geography of domes, dozens of them, scores of them, the rounded crowns of churches and bathhouses and cistern roofs rising above the terracotta and timber of ordinary buildings. Columns stand at intervals where the ancient forums once drew crowds by the tens of thousands, their capitals still gilded, throwing back the sunset in small, bright flares. Towers mark the corners of palaces and monasteries, some whole, some half-ruined, their upper stories open to the sky like broken teeth. And above it all, commanding every sightline, the dome of Hagia Sophia. It does not soar exactly. That is not quite the right word. It presides. The great dome sits upon its ring of windows like a crown set on a brow, and even from here, even at this distance with the light-going copper and the swifts circling above, the lead-sheeted roof glows with a dull, warm radiance. 916 years that building has stood. Emperors have been crowned beneath it. Armies have marched out from its doors to defend or destroy. And tonight it holds the skyline as it has held it since the reign of Justinian, patient and immense and irreducibly present. The evening light is failing now, degree by slow degree. The bronze on the water is darkening to copper, then to something closer to pewter. No stars yet, but the sky to the east has deepened into a blue so dark it is nearly indigo, and the moon, 3/4 full, a lopsided coin of pale silver, is already visible above the hills of Asia, still faint against the remaining daylight but gaining definition as the minutes pass. Look out to sea. Past the light on the water, past the fishing boats riding at anchor in the shallows with their sails furled and their hulls rocking gently, past the small rocky islands that dot the Marmara like stepping stones. Out there, where the horizon has gone dark, you can see them. Ships. Not a fleet so much as a wall. Ottoman galleys and transport vessels stretched across the sea approaches in a long, dark line. At this distance, and in this failing light, they are little more than silhouettes, the angular shapes of lateen sails and the low, sleek profiles of war galleys. But there are so many of them. 100, perhaps more. Enough to close off the Marmara entirely, to seal the city from any relief by sea, to ensure that no merchant vessel slips through with grain or soldiers or the one piece of good news that might change everything. The blockade has held for weeks. The sea that once brought Constantinople its wealth and its survival, fish and grain and timber and silk and soldiers, is now simply a boundary, another wall, one the defenders cannot man. The last of the sun slides below the western hills. The water goes dark. The ships disappear into the general blackness of the sea, and for a moment, you might almost forget they are there. Almost. You pass through a sea gate, a low archway in the ramparts, barely wide enough for a cart, its wooden doors banded with iron that has gone orange with rust. The gate was built for commerce, for fishermen bringing their catch-up from the waterfront, for merchants hauling amphoras of wine and oil from the harbor. A guard nods as you pass. He is Greek, middle-aged, wearing a coat of riveted mail that has seen better decades. His spear leans against the wall beside him. He does not challenge you. No point in vigilance at the sea gates tonight. The danger is to the west, at the land walls, where the Ottoman guns have been pounding for 7 weeks. Here at the waterfront, the war feels almost distant, a problem belonging to another part of the city, separated by a mile of streets and the slow incline of the peninsula's spine. The street beyond the gate is narrow and slopes upward. Stone paving, uneven, cracked in places, with weeds pushing through the joints. The buildings on either side are close enough that their upper stories nearly touch, the timber balconies reaching toward each other like hands across a gap. Laundry hangs from one of them, forgotten or simply left, a woman's linen shift and two smaller garments, a child's, barely stirring in the still evening air. This quarter is not empty. Behind closed shutters, you can hear a man speaking, low and rapid, the words indistinct, the clatter of a pot. A child's laugh, bright and sudden and immediately hushed, as though laughter were something to be careful with tonight. From somewhere ahead, the smell of cooking, olive oil heating in a pan, the sharp green scent of it mixing with something sweeter. Onions, perhaps, bread warming. But walk a little further, and the inhabited streets begin to thin. You turn a corner and find yourself facing a marble colonnade, 6 columns, pale as bone in the fading light, their Corinthian capitals still intact, still crowned with carved acanthus leaves as delicate as lace. This was a portico once, the entrance to something grand. A public building, perhaps, or a wealthy family's mansion. Behind the columns, nothing. A wall of rubble and packed earth where a structure once stood, now overgrown with fig trees and wild grape. The roots have worked their way into the foundations and split the remaining stonework. A tortoiseshell cat sits on the base of one column, watching you with that particular feline indifference that requires no historical context to understand. This is what Constantinople looks like in 1453. A city built for 500,000, now home to 50,000. The mathematics of that emptiness are everywhere. For every occupied house, 9 stand empty or collapsed. For every street with voices and cooking smells and lamplight behind shutters, 3 or 4 lie silent, paving stones cracked and weedy, buildings slowly returning to the earth. You walk through a forum, one of the great public squares that once anchored the city's civic life. The open space is vast, paved in marble that has buckled and heaved over the centuries. At its center, a column rises 30 feet into the air, topped with a gilded statue of some emperor whose name the locals have long since forgotten. The gold still catches the last ambient light, a bright point against the darkening sky. But the buildings that once framed this square, the Senate House, the public baths, the shops and arcaded walkways are mostly gone. In their place, vegetable gardens, rows of beans and onions and leafy greens, carefully tended, the soil dark and recently watered. Someone has built a low fence of salvaged timber around the plots, and a scarecrow stands among the cabbages, its stick arms dressed in a torn silk caftan that might once have been worth a year's wages. Something both practical and heartbreaking about this. The people who remain have adapted. They have filled the grandeur with sustenance. Where senators debated, lettuce grows. Where chariots once thundered down the Messe, the great central avenue, toward the hippodrome, an old woman keeps chickens in a coop built from fragments of carved marble. The chickens do not care that their roost was once part of an emperor's triumphal arch. You pass a monastery. Its outer wall is intact, but the gate stands open, and inside you can see a courtyard with a dry fountain and an orchard of apricot trees, their branches heavy with unripe fruit. A single monk sits on a stone bench beneath the trees, reading by the last of the daylight, holding the book very close to his face, squinting. He does not look up. The monastery was built to house 60 brothers. He may be one of 5 or 6 who remain. The empty cells around the courtyard have become storage rooms, or simply stand with their doors open to the weather. Plaster peeling from their walls in long, pale strips that curl like parchment. A dog trots past you, lean, feral, one ear torn. It moves with the particular confidence of an animal that has learned this territory thoroughly, that knows which houses still have people who might throw scraps, and which have been empty long enough that even the mice have moved on. The dog does not fear you, barely registers your presence. It has its own concerns, its own map of the city drawn in smells and routines that have nothing to do with empires or sieges. The light is nearly gone now. Oil lamps are appearing in windows, small, warm points of amber behind wooden shutters. Olive oil gives the cleanest flame, and the wealthier households add drops of fragrant resin to sweeten the smoke. The smell drifts into the street, and mingles with the cooling stone and the ever-present undertone of salt air that reaches every corner of this peninsula city. You are never more than a few minutes' walk from the sea in Constantinople. The water defines everything: the shape of the city, the taste of the air, the sound that underlies every silence. Above you, the sky has gone fully dark in the east. The moon is higher now, sharp-edged and bright, and its light is beginning to replace the sun's, cooler, more diffuse, turning the marble ruins silver-white and casting long shadows behind the columns and broken walls. The dome of Hagia Sophia, which glowed warm bronze at sunset, now stands as a dark mass against the stars, its outline unmistakable, its windows unlit. From this angle, less like a building and more like a small mountain, something geological, something that has always been here and will always be. Follow the smell of bread. It leads you downhill, through a covered passage where the timber roof has partly collapsed and the stars show through the gaps, and then out into a wider street where the air is suddenly thick with warmth and yeast and the particular sweetness of dough baking in a wood-fired oven. The communal bakery stands at the corner where two streets meet, a squat building of brick with a domed roof blackened by decades of smoke. The oven inside is a hemisphere of clay, and the heat radiating from its mouth warms the entire street. The baker is a heavy-set man with flour dusted up to his elbows and into his beard, and he is pulling flatbreads from the oven with a long wooden paddle, stacking them on a stone counter where a half-dozen people wait. They pay in small copper coins or, when coins are scarce, in kind, a basket of figs, a jar of pickled capers, a promise of labor. The economy of a besieged city is fluid, improvisational. What matters is that the ovens are still lit. As long as there is bread, there is something to organize a day around, something to come home to. Beyond the bakery, the market continues in a loose scatter of stalls and blankets spread on the paving stones. A fisherman has laid out the evening's catch, silver-scaled mackerel and small red mullet, their eyes still bright, arranged in neat rows on a marble slab that was probably, centuries ago, a piece of some building's facade. The fish gleam in the lamplight, and the smell of them, clean, briny, faintly metallic, cuts through the warm bread smell like a cool breeze. An old woman sells dried herbs from baskets, rosemary in stiff, fragrant bundles, oregano, thyme, bunches of dried mint tied with rough string. She sits on a stool behind her wares and does not call out to passers-by. Her herbs speak for themselves. The smell of them, released by the warmth of the evening, is green and sharp and medicinal, and it makes you think of hillsides far from here, of open country where the air moves freely and the only walls are the ones the mountains make. There is wine. A tavern, really just a ground-floor room with its shutters thrown open to the street, where clay cups of Cretan Malvasia are being poured by a man with a careful, measured hand. The wine is dark, almost purple, and it smells of raisins and warm stone and something faintly resinous. The room is full tonight, or as full as anything gets in this diminished city. A dozen men sit on low stools or lean against the walls, their voices a steady murmur that rises and falls like the sound of the sea itself. The talk is all of the siege. It has been the only subject for 7 weeks, and by now the conversations have a well-worn quality, the same fears and hopes circulated and recirculated until they have been polished smooth by repetition. Will the Hungarian king send relief? Will the Venetian fleet arrive? How long can the walls hold? Whether Justiniani's Genoese can be trusted? Whether the Genoese in Galata, just across the Golden Horn, technically neutral, suspiciously prosperous, have been trading information to the Sultan. A man with a seaman's weathered face says he heard the great cannon cracked 2 days ago and cannot fire again. Another shakes his head. It was repaired overnight, he says. They always repair it. A third man says nothing matters except the walls. The walls have held for 1,000 years. The walls will hold. No one mentions the omens, not the eclipse, not the fog, not the strange light on the dome. These things sit in the room like an unwelcome guest that everyone has agreed not to acknowledge. The wine is good. It has traveled a long way to reach this table, from Cretan vineyards to Venetian merchant ships to this small tavern in a city under siege, possibly the last shipment that made it through the blockade. Each cup poured tonight, one cup closer to the end of the supply. But the tavern keeper pours with the same steady hand, and the men drink with the same unhurried sips, and the evening passes the way evenings have always passed in Mediterranean port cities. Slowly, in good company, with bread and wine and the sound of the sea never quite out of earshot. Further along the street, a man is closing up his stall for the night. He sells icons, small painted panels of saints and the Virgin, most of them done in the traditional style with gold leaf backgrounds and wide, solemn eyes. He wraps each one carefully in cloth before placing it in a wooden box. His movements are practiced, reverent. These are not souvenirs. Each icon is an object of genuine devotion, painted according to rules that have not changed in 500 years. The gold leaf catches the lamplight as he turns each panel, and for a moment, the saint's face seems to glow with its own interior light before the cloth covers it. Who buys icons on a night like this? The faithful, the frightened, the hopeful, a mother who wants one more saint watching over her children, a soldier who will carry a small panel of St. George against his chest when he takes his place on the walls tomorrow. The icon seller has been here every evening for as long as anyone can remember, and he will be here tomorrow evening too, God willing. He nods to you as he closes his box. His face gives nothing away. The grilled fish vendor is the last to close. His brazier still glows with coals, and the smell of charred skin and olive oil and lemon hangs in the air, rich and savory and deeply, almost painfully, ordinary. This is what a city smells like when it is alive. Not the incense of churches or the dust of ruins, but the plain, good smell of food being cooked for people who are hungry. He wraps the last 2 fish in grape leaves and hands them to a girl, 12, perhaps 13, who has been waiting with a clay dish. She thanks him and hurries away into the dark street, her sandals slapping against the stone, and the vendor begins to rake out his coals, and the light of the brazier dims, and the market is closing for what may be the last time. The streets are growing quieter. The hour is advancing, and those who are not on the walls or in the churches have gone inside, behind doors bolted and barred with whatever timber could be found. The city is drawing inward, the way a living thing draws inward against the cold. But people are still here. That is what matters. 50,000 souls in a city built for 10 times that number, and each one a world entire, with memories and habits and small daily rituals that the siege has not yet managed to erase. You pass a house where the door stands slightly ajar, and through the gap you can see a room lit by a single oil lamp. A woman sits at a low table, tearing bread into pieces and placing them in a wooden bowl. Her hands move with the automatic precision of a task, performed so many times it requires no thought, the bread torn to the same size, placed at the same intervals, the way her mother taught her and her mother's mother before that. 2 children sleep on a pallet against the far wall, curled together under a wool blanket. A boy and a girl, perhaps 5 and 7. The boy's mouth is slightly open. The girl has one arm thrown over her brother's chest. The woman does not look up. She does not know you are there, and even if she did, she would not care. She is performing the most fundamental act of motherhood, preparing food so her children will wake to something warm in the morning. She has done this every night for years. She will do it tonight. Whether tomorrow brings the same dawn or a different one entirely, the bread will be ready. That is not hope, exactly. It is something older and more stubborn than hope. It is simply what you do. She adds a piece of white cheese to the bowl, crumbly, sharp-smelling, Cretan, a handful of dried figs, dark and sticky, a small clay pitcher of water, covered with a cloth to keep out the dust. Simple, sufficient, all the abundance this household needs. Elsewhere in the city, a Venetian merchant sits in the counting house of his warehouse near the Golden Horn, going over his ledgers by candlelight. He has been in Constantinople for 11 years. He has a Greek wife and 2 children who speak both Italian and Greek without distinction, sliding between the languages the way children slide between games. His warehouse holds bolts of silk, casks of Cretan wine, barrels of salted cod, a small fortune in pepper and cinnamon. All of it worthless if the walls fall. He knows this. He turns the pages of his ledger anyway. The numbers are a kind of prayer, a declaration that the future exists, that accounts will be settled, that goods will be bought and sold and delivered. He writes in a careful hand, the ink dark and precise, and the candle flame bends in a draft that comes from somewhere he cannot identify. In a small church near the Hippodrome, one of the hundreds that dot the city, this one barely larger than a well-appointed living room, an old priest is preparing for the night's vigil. He has been a priest for 40 years. He was ordained in this church, and his father worshipped here before him, and his grandfather before that. The icons on the iconostasis are familiar to him the way a family member's face is familiar, every crack in the paint, every place where the gold has worn thin, every shadow in the corner of the Virgin's eye. He lights the candles one by one, touching the flame to each wick with a steady hand, and the icons emerge from the darkness gradually, as though waking up. The Christ Pantocrator, with his right hand raised in blessing. Saints Peter and Paul, their robes painted in fading crimson and blue. The Theotokos, the Mother of God, holding the infant Christ, her expression neither joyful nor sorrowful, but something between, something that acknowledges both at once. The priest's knees ache when he kneels. They have ached for years. He kneels anyway. Outside, on the walls, the soldiers wait. A patchwork force, Greek militia in whatever armor they own or have been issued, Venetian Marines in their distinctive kettle helmets, Genoese crossbowmen with their heavy, accurate weapons, a handful of Catalans, some Cretan sailors who know ships better than fortifications, but who will fight where they are placed. They have been on the walls for 7 weeks, sleeping in shifts on the stone walkways, eating when food is brought to them, repairing each night what the Ottoman cannon destroy each day. 7 weeks of bombardment. The great gun, Orban's cannon, 27 feet of cast bronze, fires 7 times a day, and each shot sends a stone ball weighing 1,300 pounds into the walls with a sound like the earth splitting open. The smaller guns fire more often, 100 shots a day, chewing at the masonry in a slow, relentless grinding. The defenders fill the breaches every night with barrels of packed earth, with rubble, with timber stockades they know will not withstand another day's shelling. And then they fill them again, and again, because that is what you do when you cannot do anything else. The children have grown accustomed to the sound. That is perhaps the strangest detail of life in Constantinople this spring, that children who have known nothing but cannon fire for nearly 2 months have learned to sleep through it, the way children in a harbor town learn to sleep through foghorns. The absence of the cannon these past 2 days, the silence since Mehmed ordered his army to rest and pray, has been more disorienting than the noise ever was. They wake in the night and do not know why. The silence itself has become the disturbance. In a house near the Blockerney Palace, an old woman sits by an open window, looking out at the city she has known for 70 years. She remembers a Constantinople that was larger, if not greater, more people in the streets, more ships in the harbor, more noise and commerce and the ordinary friction of a crowded city. She remembers her wedding day, when the procession wound through streets lined 3 deep with neighbors and strangers, and the church was so full that people stood on each other's feet and no one minded. She remembers the birth of her children, 3 sons, 2 of whom are dead now, 1 of disease and 1 in a skirmish on the Peloponnese that no one remembers. The 3rd is on the walls tonight. She has not seen him since morning. She does not pray. She has prayed enough. Decades of prayer, the words worn smooth as river stones. Tonight, she simply sits and looks out at the rooftops and the dome of Hagia Sophia and the moon hanging over the Golden Horn, and she breathes and she waits. The breeze coming through the window carries the smell of roses from a garden somewhere below. One of the wild gardens that have sprung up in the gaps between buildings, the bushes untended and riotous, blooming as they always bloom in late May, oblivious to the affairs of empires. The roses do not know the city is under siege. They are doing what they have always done, and they will do it tomorrow, and the day after, no matter whose flags fly from the towers. A kind of comfort in that, if you are willing to find it. The monk you saw earlier has finished his reading. The light was too dim, finally, and his eyes too old. He has closed his book, a psalter, the pages soft with use, the binding repaired so many times that more of it is thread and glue than original leather. He sits in the dark courtyard of his half-empty monastery and listens to the sounds of the evening. The apricot trees stir in a breeze he cannot feel at ground level. Somewhere beyond the walls in the Ottoman camp, a faint sound, drums, perhaps, or chanting, or merely the low murmur of tens of thousands of men settling in for the night. Hard to tell at this distance. It could be anything. It could be nothing. He is not afraid. Or rather, he is afraid in the way that has become ordinary, a low, steady hum of anxiety that has been present so long it has become indistinguishable from the background noise of daily life. He has made his peace. He has confessed. He has forgiven those he needed to forgive and asked forgiveness from those he has wronged. If tomorrow brings death, he will meet it having done what he could. If tomorrow brings another day like today, he will read his psalter and tend his trees and carry water from the cistern. That will be enough. Down near the Golden Horn, where the harbor meets the Great Chain, a Genoese crossbowman named Luca, or so you imagine, for you never learn his name, sits with his back against a bollard, cleaning the mechanism of his weapon with an oiled rag. 26 years old. A professional soldier since he was 14. He came to Constantinople 5 months ago with Justiniani's company, 700 men on 2 ships, sailing from Genoa across the winter Mediterranean, because there was money to be made and a reputation to be earned in the defense of a famous city. He did not come out of faith or loyalty. He came because this is what he does, and because a man with a good crossbow and a steady nerve can always find work where walls are under threat. The crossbow lies across his knees, its steel bow gleaming faintly in the moonlight. A powerful weapon, more accurate than a longbow at close range, capable of punching through mail at 100 paces. He has fired it so many times in the past 7 weeks that the calluses on his right hand have split and reformed twice. His shoulders ache from cranking the windlass. His eyes are gritty with fatigue. But the weapon is clean, the string is waxed, and the quiver at his hip holds 20 bolts. That is all that matters now. He looks out across the Golden Horn. The water is black and still, reflecting the stars in long, broken columns of light. The chain stretches across the mouth of the inlet, massive iron links, each one as long as a man's forearm, strung between wooden pontoons that ride low in the water. Beyond the chain, on the far shore, the Genoese colony of Galata sits dark and quiet on its hill, its tower a black finger against the sky. Galata is neutral. Galata has not been attacked. Galata will survive this, no matter what happens to Constantinople. Luca thinks about this sometimes, and when he does, he thinks about the particular shape of neutrality, how it looks from this side of the water, very much like betrayal. He finishes cleaning the crossbow, sets it carefully beside him, and leans his head back against the bollard. The stone is cold. The air smells of tar from the caulking yards and salt from the harbor, and something faintly sweet night-blooming jasmine from one of the gardens that have crept down to the waterfront in the years since the warehouses emptied. He closes his eyes. He does not sleep. He simply rests, the way a tool rests between uses, gathering what strength remains for the work ahead. In another part of the city, in a workshop off a narrow lane that leads nowhere, a metalworker is banking his forge for the night. He has spent the day repairing armor, hammering dents out of breastplates, replacing broken rivets in mail shirts, sharpening swords grown dull from 7 weeks of nightly use against Ottoman scaling ladders. Steady work. There is always more of it. He is one of the last craftsmen of his kind in the city, and the soldiers bring him everything: cracked helms, bent crossbow cranks, shield bosses that have come loose, even a Byzantine officer's ceremonial sword with a crack running through the blade that no amount of reforging can fully mend. He mended it anyway. You do what you can. The forge hisses as he rakes the coals and covers them with ash to keep them alive through the night. The heat is still fierce enough to warm the whole shop, and the smell of hot iron and coal smoke fills the air with a sharp, mineral tang that clings to his clothes and his hair and his skin. His hands are scarred, long white lines across the fingers and palms from a lifetime of working near heated metal. He flexes them now, opening and closing his fists, feeling the stiffness in his joints. He is not old. But his hands are. He steps outside and pulls the wooden door shut behind him. The lane is dark. A cat, the same one or its twin, watches him from a windowsill across the way. The moonlight falls into the lane at a sharp angle, illuminating one wall and leaving the other in shadow, and the metalworker stands for a moment at the threshold, looking up at the narrow strip of sky between the buildings. The stars are thick and clear. They have always been one of the consolations of life in a city with so few lamps. On a clear night, you can see the Milky Way from the middle of Constantinople, a pale river of light pouring across the darkness. He does not know the names of the constellations, but he knows the sky, the way you know the ceiling of a room you have slept in all your life. He walks home, his wife is waiting, his children are asleep. The moon climbs higher, the shadows shift. The city settles into the particular stillness of a warm night in late May, not silent, never truly silent, but quiet in the way that a held breath is quiet. Somewhere always, the waves moving against the sea walls. Somewhere, a shutter creaks. A dog barks once, twice, then stops. The embers of the fish vendor's brazier still glow faintly in the empty market, a small red eye in the darkness, and the smell of charcoal and lemon and olive oil lingers in the air like the memory of a meal already eaten. Beneath the streets, in the vast underground cisterns that have kept the city alive through every siege it has ever endured, the water is still and black and cold. Hundreds of columns support the vaulted ceilings, Corinthian and Ionic and plain Roman, taken from temples and basilicas across the ancient world and repurposed here, underground, to hold up a roof that no one sees. The columns stand in the water like a submerged forest, and the water reflects them so perfectly that it is impossible, in the darkness, to tell where the stone ends and the reflection begins. Dripping, the slow, patient percussion of water finding its way through stone, the oldest sound in the city, older than the bells, older than the voices, older than any music. The cisterns were here before the churches. They will be here after. Above ground, the moonlight has turned the Messe, the great avenue that runs from the Golden Gate to the Augustan, into a river of pale stone, wide enough for 6 carts abreast, paved in marble slabs that the generations have polished with their feet. At this hour, empty. The colonnades on either side cast parallel shadows across the paving, and the effect is of walking through an enormous comb, the teeth made of light and dark. The ancient triumphal arches that span the avenue at intervals stand like doorframes into rooms that no longer exist, their carved reliefs worn smooth by rain and wind and the curious fingers of 1,000 years of passers-by. Horses and laurel wreaths and figures in togas whose features have been rubbed into anonymity by the weather and the centuries. A night breeze moves down the Messe, carrying with it the smell of the sea from both sides of the peninsula, salt from the Marmara to the south, salt from the Golden Horn to the north, and beneath it, softer, the scent of the roses. Always the roses. They grow everywhere this spring, climbing the walls of abandoned houses, sprawling across the rubble of collapsed churches, pushing their blooms through the gaps in broken fences. Pink and white and deep crimson, their petals already falling in the warm air, drifting across the paving stones like slow, fragrant snow. The city holds its breath, has been holding its breath for days. And then, cutting through the stillness like a blade through silk, a bell begins to ring. One bell, a single bronze voice from a tower near the center of the city, deep and resonant, its tone carrying across the rooftops and the empty forums and the wild gardens with their roses. It rings once, twice, 3 times, and then holds, the sound sustaining in the air, pressing gently into the stones, trembling in the surface of the water in the cisterns beneath the streets. Then another bell answers. Further away, higher in pitch, a second tower joining the first, and then a third, a fourth. Bells from every quarter of the city, some deep and sonorous, some cracked and thin with age, all of them ringing now, ringing together, filling the evening air with bronze. The woman with the bread looks up from her bowl. The Venetian merchant sets down his pen. The old priest rises from his knees, his joints protesting, and turns toward the door. The soldiers on the walls lift their heads. The old woman at her window closes her eyes and breathes the sound in the way you breathe in the smell of something you know you are experiencing for the last time. The city is being called to prayer. Not the ordinary prayer of an ordinary evening. Something larger. Something that has no precedent and will have no repetition. Tonight, for the first time in living memory, Greek and Italian, Orthodox and Catholic will walk side by side to the same altar. The schism that has divided Christendom for 400 years will dissolve, not in theology or debate, but in the simple, human act of kneeling together when the world is ending. The bells keep ringing. They fill the streets, the houses, the empty forums, the ruins, the gardens. They reach the soldiers on the walls and the fishermen at the waterfront, and the monk in his courtyard and the children asleep in their beds, who stir but do not wake, who fold the sound into whatever dreams they're dreaming and sleep on, while the bronze voices call and call and call across the city of walls and water, across the last evening of the world they know. Narration word count, ~6 500. In the late afternoon, as the light turns amber and the shadows of the great cathedral stretch long across the forum, you hear the bells begin. Not one bell, not the familiar call of a single parish church summoning its faithful to evening prayer. This is something else entirely, every bell in Constantinople ringing at once. It begins in the quarter nearest the walls, a deep, heavy iron bell tolling from the monastery of Christ Pantopops, where the monks have been praying without rest for 7 weeks. Then another joins from the south, near the harbor of Theodosius. Another from the heights of the aqueduct of Valens, where a small chapel clings to the ancient arches. Then another, and the sound spreads across the city like something spilled, rolling through the empty neighborhoods, filling the overgrown gardens, ringing off the marble columns in the abandoned forums, until the air itself seems to hum with bronze. 100 bells, 200, you cannot count them. You can only stand in the street and feel them in your chest, in your teeth, in the soles of your feet where the paving stones carry the vibration upward. The whole city is singing, and it is singing in the only language it has left. You follow the sound toward the Messe, the old processional avenue that runs like a spine through Constantinople from the Golden Gate in the west to the Great Forum near Hagia Sophia in the east. The street is wide here, paved in worn limestone, and it is filling with people. They are forming a procession, the greatest this city has seen in living memory, also the last. At the front walk the clergy. Orthodox priests in dark robes and tall cylindrical hats, their beards long, silver pectoral crosses swaying with each step. Beside them, and this is what makes the citizens stop and stare, what makes old women cross themselves and younger men blink in confusion, beside them walk Catholic friars. Franciscans in coarse brown wool, Dominican priests in black and white, Cardinal Isidore's Latin chaplains in crimson-trimmed surplices. Orthodox and Catholic, side by side, for the first time in anyone's memory, walking together. The schism between the churches is older than anyone alive. It stretches back centuries, to arguments over the nature of God and the authority of Rome, to mutual excommunications and theological bitterness that has only deepened with each passing decade. Many in Constantinople would sooner open the gates to the Sultan than accept the Latin Rite. The Grand Duke No Taras himself once said he would prefer to see the Ottoman turban in the city than the cardinal's hat. But tonight, the turban waits beyond the walls with 80,000 soldiers. And the cardinal's hat is here, walking in the same dust, praying to the same God, asking for the same miracle. Behind the clergy come the icons. They are carried on wooden frames draped in purple and crimson velvet, hoisted onto the shoulders of young men whose faces are bright with sweat, and something fiercer than exertion. The most sacred images in the city, some so old that no one remembers who painted them. The Virgin Hagia, said to have been painted by St. Luke himself, her dark face gazing out with an expression that is neither sorrow nor peace but something between them, something that holds both without choosing. The gold leaf of her halo has worn thin in places from centuries of reverent hands pressing against the frame. Other icons follow. Christ enthroned, his right hand raised in blessing, his eyes enormous and dark. Saints whose names you do not recognize, their faces rendered in the flat, otherworldly style of Byzantine painting, not portraits of men and women, but windows into a world where flesh has become something closer to light. Behind the icons come the relics, gold cases and crystal vessels carried on silk cushions, fragments of the true cross, bones of martyrs in silver reliquaries, a piece of the Virgin's robe, folded in linen within a box of cedar. These are the treasures that Constantinople has guarded for 1,000 years, the sacred objects that emperors fought wars to acquire, that pilgrims crossed continents to glimpse. Tonight they are carried through the streets, like children being shown the world, one last time. The citizens line the route. They stand on both sides of the messe, pressed shoulder to shoulder, fishermen and merchants, monks and midwives, children lifted onto their fathers' shoulders. Many are weeping. Not all. Some stand rigid and silent, their faces set in that particular expression of people who have decided not to cry and are holding on with everything they have. Others have given up that effort entirely. Tears run freely down faces tanned by the Mediterranean sun, dripping from chins, darkening the fronts of linen tunics. An old woman near you falls to her knees as the Hagia passes. She reaches out and touches the edge of the velvet drape, then presses her fingers to her lips. Her eyes are closed. Her mouth moves in prayer, and though you cannot hear the words over the bells, you can see the shape of them, familiar, worn smooth by decades of repetition, as comfortable in her mouth as her own name. The procession turns and winds westward, toward the Theodosian Walls. The route takes it through the emptier quarters, where orchards have swallowed the foundations of houses and grapevines crawl over fallen columns. Even here, people have gathered. They stand in doorways and lean from upper windows, and the icons pass beneath them like a river of gold flowing through a ravine of stone. At the walls, the defenders are waiting. They stand on the ramparts and in the shadows of the battered towers, Greek soldiers in dented armor, Venetian marines with crossbows slung across their backs, Genoese men-at-arms with the dust of 7 weeks' fighting still ground into their skin, exhausted in a way that goes deeper than the body. Their eyes have the flat, distant look of men who have been woken too many times in the night, who have hauled barrels of earth to fill breaches while cannon fire shook the ground beneath their feet, who have buried friends in shallow graves behind the inner wall because there was no time to carry them further. When they see the icons approaching, something shifts. The soldiers nearest the procession kneel. It happens without an order, without discussion. One man drops to his knees, and then the man beside him, and then the next, and the kneeling spreads along the wall like a wave, like the shadow of a cloud moving across a field. Battle-scarred men in filthy armor, pressing their foreheads to the backs of their gauntlets. A sound rises from them, not cheering, not a war cry, but a low murmur of prayer that mixes with the bells until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. The priests bless them as they pass, hands making the sign of the cross. Holy water flicked from a spergilla in bright arcs that catch the afternoon light. The drops land on armor and bare skin and dusty stone, and the soldiers lift their faces to receive them the way parched ground receives rain. Still the bells ring, the whole city vibrating with them, a chord struck in bronze that will not fade. The procession turns east again, descending through the old city, and now you can see where it is going. Everyone can see. The dome rises above the rooftops, catching the late light and holding it in a way that makes the lead-sheathed surface glow a dull, warm gold. Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, 916 years old and still the largest enclosed space in the Christian world. You have heard of it. Everyone has heard of it. Even in the farthest corners of Europe, in villages where the roads turn to mud in winter and the priest can barely read, people know that somewhere in the east there is a church so vast that it seems to have been built not by human hands, but by angels who misunderstood the scale of men. But hearing of it and standing before it are different things in the way that hearing about the sea and standing on the shore are different things. The reality does not merely exceed the description. It makes the description seem like a kind of lie, not because it was wrong, but because words, no matter how carefully chosen, cannot carry the weight of this much stone. The exterior is massive and plain. Enormous buttresses brace the walls like the roots of ancient trees. The lead-covered dome sits atop a series of half-domes that cascade downward, each one supporting the weight above it, the whole structure a feat of engineering so audacious that Justinian's architects were working at the very edge of what was possible. In the 6th century, 1400 years of wind and earthquake and the settling of foundations, and it still stands. The mortar between the bricks has been repointed so many times that some sections are more repair than original, but it stands. The marble steps leading to the main doors are worn into shallow bowls by the passage of feet. 9 centuries of worshippers climbing these steps, emperors and beggars, soldiers returning from campaigns and refugees fleeing from them, children carried in their mothers' arms for baptism, old men climbing slowly, one hand on the wall, coming to pray for the last time. Tonight, the steps are full. The procession climbs, and the crowd presses in behind it. The space before the great western doors is packed, bodies filling every gap, faces turned upward, the smell of sweat and incense, and the particular dusty sweetness of old stone warmed by an afternoon sun. The doors open. Enormous, ancient timber reinforced with bronze, tall enough that a man on horseback could ride through without lowering his head. They swing inward, and the interior reveals itself not all at once but in stages. The way dawn reveals a valley, first a suggestion of space, then a sense of scale, then the full, staggering reality. Light pours outward from the opening doors. Not sunlight, something warmer and more alive. The light of 1,000 candles and hundreds of silver oil lamps, all of it caught and multiplied by golden mosaics that cover the walls and ceiling and the curve of the great dome above, so that the interior seems to generate its own radiance, as if the building itself has learned, over 9 centuries of prayer, how to glow. The crowd draws a collective breath, and then, slowly, reverently, they begin to file inside. You step across the threshold, and the world changes. The noise of the street, the bells, the weeping, the shuffle of thousands of feet on stone, all of it falls away, replaced not by silence but by something more complex. A hush that contains within it 100 smaller sounds, each one amplified and transformed by the vast, curved interior. A whispered prayer from somewhere to your left carries across the nave and returns as a soft echo, the words indistinct but the emotion unmistakable. The rustle of a priest's vestments sounds like the turning of a page. A child's cough rises toward the dome and comes back gentler. This is the acoustic miracle of Hagia Sophia. The building was designed, or perhaps the word is discovered, because its architects Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus were working in territory no one had mapped before to do something extraordinary to the human voice. A single person, speaking at normal volume, can be heard from one end of the nave to the other. A choir sounds like a choir of angels, the notes sustained and layered by the curving surfaces until harmony becomes something you feel in your body, in the hollows of your bones. And the space, you have to look up, everyone looks up, impossible not to. The dome floats 180 feet above the marble floor, and that word, floats, is not metaphor. It is the only honest description of what the eye perceives. The dome rests on a ring of 40 arched windows that pierce its base, and the light streaming through those windows creates the illusion that the dome is not sitting on anything at all. It hangs in the air like a thought, like a held breath, like the curved interior of a skull contemplating itself. The mosaics catch the light. Gold, everywhere gold. Not the brash, new gold of a freshly minted coin, but a deep, burnished gold that has been absorbing candlelight for 900 years and has learned to give it back softened, warmed, alive. The tesserae, tiny cubes of glass backed with gold leaf, are set at slightly different angles, so that as the light shifts, the images seem to move, to breathe. Christ Pantocrator gazes down from the dome with eyes that follow you no matter where you stand. His right hand is raised. His expression is beyond human reading, stern and compassionate and infinitely patient, all at once. On the pendentives, the curved triangles that support the dome, 6-winged seraphim spread their feathers in gold and blue and scarlet, their faces half hidden, their wings impossibly layered. In the apse, the Virgin Mary holds the infant Christ, her robes rendered in deep blue against the gold, her face dark and serene. And the candles. 1,000 of them burn in the nave tonight, in standing candelabra of wrought iron, in crystal holders suspended from the ceiling on long chains, in the hands of worshippers who carry them like small, personal prayers made visible. The flames are steady in the still air, each one a perfect teardrop of light reflected and re-reflected by the mosaics until the whole interior shimmers. The silver oil lamps add their own warmth. Dozens hang from the ceiling on chains, large hammered bowls of silver and silver gilt, each one filled with olive oil that burns with a clean, bright flame. Olive oil gives the purest light, and in a space this vast, with surfaces this reflective, the effect is of a gentle, perpetual sunrise. Shadows are soft here, nothing harsh. The light seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the building has swallowed the sun and is holding it in its belly. And the incense. Frankincense in silver censers, swung on chains by deacons who move through the crowd with the practiced grace of men who have performed this ritual 10,000 times. Blue-gray spirals rise from the censers and drift upward, caught by the warm air currents that the candles create, and the smoke climbs in slow, twisting columns toward the dome. The smell is deep and resinous, ancient and calming, the smell of every Orthodox church you have ever entered, concentrated and amplified by this space, until it seems to coat the inside of your lungs. The cathedral is full. Not crowded the way a marketplace is crowded, but filled to capacity in the way of a great vessel slowly brimming. Every surface that can support a body holds one. Citizens stand shoulder to shoulder in the nave, pressed into the side aisles, gathered in the galleries above. Soldiers have come down from the walls, those who could be spared, even briefly, and they stand in their armor among the civilians, swords still at their hips, faces gray with fatigue. Among them, not elevated above them, not seated on a throne or standing on a dais, stands Emperor Constantine XI. He is wearing armor. The light catches the plates of steel at his shoulders and chest, and the Byzantine double-headed eagle on his surcoat seems to shift and breathe in the candlelight. His face is drawn. He has not slept properly in weeks. His hair is dark, threaded with gray, and his beard is unkempt in a way that would have been unthinkable in the court of his ancestors. He looks like what he is. A man of 48 who has been carrying an impossible weight for a very long time, and who knows that tonight, one way or another, he will set it down. He stands among his people, not apart from them. One more body in the nave, one more face lifted toward the dome, one more voice, when the liturgy begins, joining the prayer. Cardinal Isidore presides. An old man, a Greek who has spent most of his life among the Latins, who was once the Metropolitan of Kiev before being appointed papal legate to this dying city. He stands at the altar in vestments of white and gold, and beside him stand Orthodox clergy in their own vestments, dark and embroidered and heavy with tradition. The two rites, separated for centuries by pride and theology and the cold mechanics of ecclesiastical politics, are tonight brought together by something stronger than any of those forces. Fear, sorrow, love, the knowledge that this is the end. The liturgy begins. The prayers rise in Greek and in Latin, the two languages weaving together in the vast acoustic space, until they become something neither Greek nor Latin, but simply human, the sound of people asking God for help when they know, in the deepest chamber of their hearts, that help is not coming. The responses come from the congregation, thousands of voices murmuring the familiar words, the rhythms worn smooth by lifetimes of repetition, the syllables as natural as breathing. Then the hymns. A single voice begins, a cantor, standing somewhere near the apse, his voice a clear, unhurried tenor that rises into the dome and is caught there, sustained, amplified, returned. The melody is old, older than anyone in this room, older than the building itself. This hymn was ancient when Hagia Sophia was new. The notes climb and the dome receives them and gives them back transformed, richer, fuller, layered with the ghost of their own echo, and the cantor is no longer singing alone. The building is singing with him. Other voices join. The choir, such as it is, monks and deacons and priests whose voices have been trained by decades of daily offices. But tonight, the congregation does not merely listen. They sing, all of them. Old men whose voices crack and waver. Women whose sopranos cut through the bass foundation like light through water. Children who know the melody but not the meaning, their high, pure tones rising above the rest. The sound fills the dome the way water fills a bowl. It reaches the golden mosaics, and the mosaics seem to absorb it, to hold it, to add their own brightness to it. Christ Pantocrator gazes down through a haze of incense and song, and his gold leaf eyes catch the candlelight, and for a moment, just a moment, it is possible to believe that the dome is not a dome at all but an opening in the roof of the world, and that the song is not rising but being drawn upward, received, heard. Close your eyes, you do not need to see to feel this. The sound enters through the skin. The incense coats the back of your throat and fills the space behind your eyes. The warmth of 1,000 candles presses against your face like gentle hands. Around you, the breathing of the congregation, slow, deep, synchronized, has become a single breath, a single body filling this ancient space, and the hymn is its heartbeat. In the galleries above, women stand pressed against the marble railings, looking down. Mothers who have left their children with neighbors or grandmothers who have come here to pray because praying is the only action still available to them. Their voices carry down from the upper level and mingle with the voices below, and the effect is of sound arriving from two altitudes at once, layered, as if the building has given the human voice a second dimension. A soprano, pure and thin, descends from the gallery and finds a baritone rising from the nave, and the two notes meet in the middle of the empty air and hold each other there, trembling for the length of a breath. The deacons swing their censers in slow, identical arcs. The silver chains flash in the candlelight. The censers are old, their surfaces dented and polished smooth by generations of hands, and the frankincense inside them hisses softly as the coal beneath it shifts. The smoke rises, always rises. Drawn upward by the heat of the candles, pulled toward the dome in slow, graceful columns that twist and spread as they climb, until the upper reaches of the cathedral are filled with a blue-gray haze that softens the gold of the mosaics and gives the painted faces of the saints a dreamy, indistinct quality, as if they are watching from behind a veil. Time passes differently here. The minutes do not march forward in the orderly way they do outside. They pool, they gather. They swirl around the columns and settle in the corners and accumulate in the hollows of the dome, and an hour passes like a long, slow breath, and you cannot say when one hymn ended and the next began, because they flow into each other the way the tide flows into a bay, each one carrying a little more depth, a little more weight, a little more of the gathered sorrow of 6,000 people who know what is coming. Now the weeping begins. It starts quietly, the way rain starts, with a few drops that could be mistaken for something else. A man near the back of the nave pressing the heel of his hand against his eyes. A woman's shoulders shaking, her face turned down. But it spreads. It spreads through the congregation the way the bells spread through the city, one grief touching another, one sorrow unlocking the next, until the sound of weeping becomes part of the hymn itself, not separate from it, not an interruption, but a harmony. A descant of tears beneath the melody of prayer. Strangers embrace. A Greek merchant and a Venetian sailor, men who have eyed each other with suspicion for years across the divide of commerce and nationality, fall into each other's arms like brothers separated since childhood. An Orthodox monk and a Franciscan friar, whose theological disagreements have been rehearsed and refined over decades of mutual contempt, stand side by side and weep, and neither one can say who reached for the other's hand first. Enemies forgive. Men who have nursed grudges the way gardeners nurse roses, carefully, devotedly, with years of patient tending, suddenly find that the grudges are worthless, that they have been carrying stones in their pockets on a night when they need their hands free. Old debts canceled with a look. Old insults washed clean. The schism of centuries, the great, intractable wound between East and West, between Constantinople and Rome, dissolves in this room, in this hour, not through theology or diplomacy or the pronouncements of councils, but through the simple, irreducible fact that everyone here is going to die. Even men made of stone would have wept. The communion comes. Cardinal Isidore raises the bread. The words of institution are spoken in Latin, but every person in this room knows their meaning in whatever language they dream in. This is my body. This is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me. The bread is broken, the wine is poured, and the faithful come forward. Greeks and Latins together, Orthodox and Catholic kneeling side by side at the altar of Hagia Sophia, receiving the sacrament from the same hands, drinking from the same cup. This has not happened in living memory. The theological objections that made it impossible yesterday are still, technically, unresolved. Nothing has been settled. No council has convened. No papal bull has been issued. No patriarch has made a concession. But tonight, none of that matters. Tonight, the bread is bread, and the wine is wine, and the grace is grace, and it flows equally to every mouth that opens to receive it, regardless of which direction the priest faces when he prays. The candles burn lower. The incense thickens. The hymns continue, each one flowing into the next without pause, a river of sound that carries the hours forward. The light in the 40 windows at the base of the dome is changing, the gold of late afternoon giving way to deeper amber, then to the soft gray of dusk, and the candles and oil lamps grow brighter as the natural light fades, until the interior of Hagia Sophia is entirely lit by flame. In the candlelight, the mosaics come fully alive. The gold tesserae catch the flickering warmth and throw it back in 1,000 directions at once, so that the walls themselves seem to pulse, to breathe, to participate in the prayer. The face of the Virgin in the apse glows with a softness that no painter could have intended, a collaboration of art and fire and time, the accumulated warmth of 9 centuries of candlelit worship soaked into the glass and stone and given back tonight for the last time. This is the last time. The last time these candles will be lit for this purpose. The last time this hymn will rise into this dome and be returned, transformed. The last time the frankincense will climb in its blue-gray spirals toward the face of Christ Pantocrator and pass through the ring of windows into the evening sky. The last time the bread will be broken at this altar. The last time the wine will be poured. The last time these mosaics will watch over Christian worship. These patient, golden faces that have witnessed emperors crowned and heretics condemned, that have absorbed the prayers of millions, that have glowed through plague years and festival days and every ordinary Sunday morning for 916 years. After tonight, the mosaics will be covered. Plaster will hide their faces. The call to prayer will replace the hymn. The altar will be dismantled, the icons removed, the silver lamps melted down or carried away. Hagia Sophia will survive, too magnificent to destroy, too useful to abandon, but it will become something else. The prayers that fill it tomorrow will be in a different language, directed toward a different point on the compass. The faith will change. The dome will remain. But the worshippers do not know this, Or rather, they know it in the way that a man standing at the edge of a cliff knows the ground ends with the body, not the mind. Their minds are full of prayer. Their bodies know that this is ending. And so they weep and they sing and they hold each other, and the candles burn down and the incense rises, and the dome holds it all, the sound and the smoke and the sorrow, the way a cupped hand holds water. Gently, for as long as it can. Runciman called it the Requiem for the Roman Empire. It is that, but it is also something smaller and therefore larger, a room full of people saying goodbye to everything they have known, in the most beautiful space they have ever entered, on the last night of the only world they have. The liturgy draws toward its close, and the emperor moves. You see him before you hear him, because in this crowd, in this light, he is simply another figure in armor. But the crowd parts, not with the stiff formality of court protocol, but with the gentle, instinctive movement of people making space for someone they love. They press back, and he passes through them like a man walking through tall grass, the people bending and closing behind him. Constantine approaches the altar. His step is steady, his face composed. Whatever grief he carries, and he carries a great deal of it, you can see it in the set of his jaw and the way his eyes remain fixed forward, not looking at the faces around him, because to look at them now would be to break. Whatever grief he carries, he holds it the way a man holds a sword. Close to his body, part of him, the weight of it familiar. He has spent the afternoon giving orders and speeches, rallying men who have every reason to despair. He has spoken of glory and martyrdom, of the crowns that await those who fall in defense of their city and their faith. He has told his Genoese allies that their bravery will echo through history. He has told his Venetian sailors that their republic will remember them with pride. He has told his Greek soldiers that they fight not only for Constantinople, but for the civilization it carries in its stones. All of those words were true, and he meant every one of them. But words are for other people. Here, at the altar, he has come for something else. He kneels. The armor makes it difficult. The steel plates press against his thighs and the joints creak, and he kneels slowly, heavily, the way a man kneels when he is very tired and knows he will not rise easily. His hands come together in front of his chest, the fingers laced, and his head bows. He has asked pardon of all whom he has wronged. This is what the chroniclers record, and the simplicity of the statement conceals its depth. To ask pardon of all whom you have wronged requires first an accounting, a careful, honest survey of every debt, every slight, every promise broken or loyalty betrayed or kindness withheld. It requires the kind of honesty that most people never achieve, because most people are never forced to. Most people die with their accounts unsettled, their apologies unmade, their small cruelties unexamined. Constantine does not have that luxury. He is settling his accounts tonight because there will be no tomorrow in which to settle them. And so he has gone through the list, the courtiers he offended, the advisors he dismissed, the soldiers he punished too harshly or rewarded too little, the brother whose throne he took, the alliances he failed to secure, the walls he failed to repair in time, and for each one he has said the words, "Forgive me, I was wrong, I am sorry." Now he kneels at the altar and receives the bread. Cardinal Isidore places it on his tongue, this thin wafer that is, depending on the depth of your belief, either a symbol or the actual body of God. Constantine closes his eyes, his throat moves, the bread is swallowed. The wine follows, a sip from a golden chalice, the rim cold against his lips, the wine dark and slightly bitter. His last communion, the last time the body and blood of Christ will pass the lips of a Roman emperor. The sacrament that has sustained the imperial line since Constantine the Great, the first Constantine, the one who built this city, who raised Christianity from a persecuted sect to the religion of an empire. That sacrament ends here, tonight, with this man, on his knees on the marble floor of the church his namesake's successors built. 11 centuries. From Constantine I to Constantine XI. From a new city rising on the Bosphorus to this old one, battered and diminished, its walls crumbling, its population a tenth of what it was, its enemies camped so close you can hear their horses in the darkness beyond the moat. 11 centuries on one man's shoulders. He rises. It takes a moment. His hand finds the edge of the altar and he pushes himself upright, the armor shifting and settling, and he stands. He turns to face the congregation, and for a moment, just a moment, his eyes sweep the room. The 1,000 candles, the golden mosaics, the faces of his people, wet with tears, watching him, the dome above holding its breath. He does not speak, nothing left to say. He has spoken his speeches and asked his pardons and taken his communion. He has done everything a man can do to prepare for what is coming. Everything except the one thing that remains, to go to the walls, to draw his sword, and to fight until he can no longer stand. He walks toward the doors. The crowd parts again, and this time the silence is absolute. No one speaks. No one calls out encouragement or blessing. They simply watch him go, this man, their emperor, the last emperor, walking out of Hagia Sophia with the bread of communion still dissolving on his tongue and the weight of Rome on his back. He passes through the great bronze doors and into the evening. The air outside is cooler, the incense and candle heat of the cathedral giving way to the salt breeze off the Marmara, carrying with it the scent of spring roses from the gardens that grow in the city's empty quarters. The sky above the dome is darkening, blue giving way to indigo. The first stars appearing, pale, tentative, as if unsure whether they are welcome. Behind him, the doors close, but the singing continues. You can hear it from outside, muffled now, the words lost, but the melody still rising, still carrying through the stone walls and upward, toward the dome that holds it and gives it back. The bells, one by one, fall silent. The bronze voices that rang all afternoon and into the evening stop, each one trailing off with a final, fading hum. The last to ring is the great bell of Hagia Sophia itself, a deep, resonant tone that seems to come not from the bell tower, but from the stone beneath your feet. It rings once, twice, a third time, and then it too falls silent, and the silence that follows is so complete you can hear the waves lapping against the sea walls half a mile away. The candles inside the cathedral gutter as the doors open briefly to let the faithful file out. They emerge blinking, dazed, their faces marked with tears and incense smoke, and the particular disorientation of people who have been in a very deep place and are now returning to the surface. They carry their candles with them, small flames cupped in their hands, sheltered from the evening breeze, and the stream of candlelight flowing down the marble steps and into the darkening streets looks, from a distance, like a river of stars pouring from the doors of the church. The dome stands dark against the first stars, 916 years of prayer, and tonight was the last. The mosaics cool in the darkness. Christ Pantocrator gazes into an empty room, his gold leaf eyes catching the light of the few candles that still burn on the altar, small, guttering flames that will go out, one by one, in the hours before dawn. And the silence of the bells spreads across the city like a held breath, waiting to be released. Word count ~6 The emperor rides north and west through the darkening streets of his city, and the city is quieter now than you have heard it all day. The bells have stopped. The procession has dissolved into the evening. The faithful have returned to their homes or to their churches, where they will pray through the night, and the prayers drift from open windows and half-closed doors as Constantine passes, soft, repetitive, the words running into each other like water over smooth stone. You catch fragments. Lord, have mercy. Mother of God, intercede for us. Grant us peace. His horse's hooves ring on the paving stones of the messe, and then on the narrower, rougher roads that branch off toward the northwestern corner of the city. The route takes him past churches where candlelight spills from the windows in warm rectangles on the ground, past shuttered houses where families huddle behind barred doors, past the garden of a ruined monastery where roses are blooming in the twilight, their scent heavy and sweet in the cooling air, untended and perfect, and unaware that any of this is happening. The Palace of Blockerney sits where the land walls meet the sea walls, at the city's northwestern corner, overlooking the Golden Horn. It was not always the seat of emperors. For centuries, the Great Palace near the Hippodrome held that distinction, a sprawling complex of marble halls and gardens that rivaled anything in Rome. But the Great Palace fell into disrepair long ago, and the later emperors moved here, to Blockernai, where the walls are closer, and the view is of the water and the hills of Galata across the narrow strait. Once Blockernai was glorious. Foreign ambassadors who visited in its prime wrote of reception halls lined with gold and purple silk, of mechanical lions that roared and golden birds that sang on silver branches, of floors so polished you could see your face in them. But that was a long time ago, generations ago. The silk is faded now. The mechanical lions are silent, their workings seized with age and neglect. The marble floors are cracked, and the cracks have been filled, where they have been filled at all, with plaster instead of new stone. You enter through a gate flanked by guards who nod at the emperor, with the exhausted familiarity of men who have been at their posts too long to stand on ceremony. The courtyard beyond is modest by imperial standards, paving stones unevenly set, a dry fountain in the center, walls of brick and stone that have been patched so many times they look like a quilt stitched by a dozen different hands. Oil lamps burn in iron brackets along the walls, their flames steady in the sheltered air, casting a warm glow on surfaces that were designed for brighter illumination. Inside, the palace is lit by candles and oil lamps. The corridors are narrow compared to what you might expect. Frescoes line the walls, scenes from the lives of saints, portraits of emperors long dead, images of Christ and the Virgin rendered in the flat, frontal style of Byzantine art, but the paint is fading. In some places, the plaster has crumbled away entirely, leaving bare brick beneath. The building is shedding its skin to show the bones underneath. Constantine dismounts in the courtyard. A groom takes his horse, a man who has performed this service 1,000 times and who performs it now with the same careful attention, loosening the girth, checking the hooves, leading the animal away to water and feed. The routines of care persisting even as the world they serve falls apart around them. The emperor walks inside. His armor clinks with each step. His boots leave prints in the dust of a corridor that has not been swept today because the servants who would have swept it are praying in the chapel. His household is assembled in the Great Hall, waiting. The hall is not grand. It was once. You can see the ghost of its former size in the proportions, the high ceiling, the arched windows that would have let in light from 3 directions when the glass was clear instead of clouded, the raised platform at the far end where a throne once sat. The throne is gone. Sold years ago, maybe, or given as a gift to buy an alliance, or it simply fell apart and no one replaced it. The specifics hardly matter. What matters is that the space it occupied is empty, and the emperor does not stand there. He stands in the center of the room, on the same level as everyone else. Around him, his household has gathered. They stand in a rough semicircle, servants and attendants, stewards and cupbearers, advisors who have counseled him through years of impossible choices, guards who have stood at his door through long nights. Perhaps 40 people, perhaps 50. The number is not important. What is important is that each of them has a face, and each face tells a particular story, and Constantine is looking at everyone. The old steward stands near the front. His name is not recorded. The chroniclers did not think to write it down, because chroniclers, even the best of them, tend to record the names of emperors and generals and forget the names of the people who kept the lamps trimmed and the floors clean. But he is here. He has served in this palace under 3 emperors, and he has outlived 2 of them. His hands are spotted with age. His back is bent from decades of carrying trays and bowing. He wears a tunic that was fine 20 years ago and is threadbare now, and he stands very straight, because this is the last thing he can do for his master, stand straight, and look him in the eye and not flinch. Near him stands a young page, a boy of perhaps 14, dark-haired, his face not yet fully formed into the man he will become. If he becomes a man. He has been in the palace for 2 years, sent here by a family who hoped that proximity to the emperor would be a form of protection. He idolizes Constantine. You can see it in the way he stands, leaning slightly forward, his hands clasped behind his back in unconscious imitation of the emperor's own posture. His eyes are bright with the particular intensity of a boy who does not yet understand that devotion, by itself, cannot save anything. The cook is here, a heavy man with flour still dusting his forearms, who prepared tonight's meal: bread, cheese, olives, a thin soup of lentils and herbs. A simple meal. The last meal. He stands near the back, half hidden behind a column, and his round face is working through expressions the way a sky works through weather: sorrow giving way to stoicism, stoicism crumbling back into sorrow. Constantine speaks. He does not raise his voice. The room is small enough and quiet enough that even a murmur carries. He speaks in Greek, the language of this court, of this city, of this empire that has called itself Roman for 11 centuries but has spoken Greek for most of them. His voice is steady, tired, the voice of a man who has been speaking all day, to soldiers, to allies, to God, and who has one more thing to say before he is done. He asks their forgiveness. The words are simple. He says that he has been imperfect, that he has been, at times, harsh when he should have been gentle, and distracted when he should have been attentive, and impatient when patience was what was needed. He says that if he has ever wronged any of them, through carelessness or pride or the failures of judgment that come with the weight of rule, he asks now, in this hour, that they forgive him. It is not a speech. It is a confession. Spoken not to a priest behind a screen, but to the people who have shared his daily life, who have brought him his food and washed his clothes and lit his lamps and stood outside his door while he slept. The people who have seen him not as an emperor, but as a man who snores, a man who forgets names, a man who eats too quickly when he is worried and paces when he cannot sleep. The room is silent for a moment after he finishes. Then the silence breaks. The old steward weeps first. His face crumples and the tears come, and he makes no effort to hide them. He steps forward and takes the emperor's hands in both of his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable in any formal court setting. A servant's rough, age-spotted hands gripping the hands of the sovereign, and he cannot speak. He tries. His mouth opens and the words will not come. But Constantine understands. He squeezes the old man's hands and nods, and the steward steps back, and the next person comes forward. One by one, each member of the household. They come to Constantine and they embrace him, and the formality of court, the careful hierarchy of who may speak and who must wait, of who stands where and who bows how deeply, all of it dissolves. It runs off these people like rain off stone, leaving only the bare, unadorned fact of human connection. A cook embracing his emperor. A page pressing his face against the cold steel of an imperial breastplate, his narrow shoulders shaking. A guard who has stood at attention for 20 years allowing himself, at last, to lean his forehead against his master's shoulder and breathe. Even men made of stone would have wept. The candles flicker in the hall. The oil lamps throw warm shadows on the faded frescoes, saints and emperors watching from the walls, their painted eyes unchanged, their expressions the same serene remove they have worn for centuries. Outside, the city prays. You can hear it if you listen, the murmur of 100 churches, a low and ceaseless hum that filters through the palace walls and fills the silence between sobs. Constantine receives each farewell. He does not hurry. He does not shorten the ritual to attend to the business of defense, though the walls need him, and the soldiers need him, and the night is burning away hour by hour. He stays because this matters, because these people matter. Because if the walls fall and the empire ends and every stone of this city is ground to dust, these moments, these particular human moments, this cook weeping, this boy trembling, this old man holding his hands, these moments will remain, preserved in the amber of S. Francie's chronicle, long after the gold leaf has darkened on the walls and the last bell has been melted for its bronze. When the last farewell has been given and the last embrace released, Constantine stands alone in the center of the hall. His household has drawn back to the edges of the room, and the space around him is empty. The candles have burned lower. The light is dimmer now, warmer, and his shadow stretches long across the cracked marble floor. He is thinking of the speech he gave this afternoon. We do not know this. S. Francis does not record Constantine's thoughts because thoughts are the one province that even the most careful chronicler cannot enter. But we can imagine. A man standing in a quiet room after a day of noise, with the weight of his words still fresh in his mind, would naturally return to them, would test them, would wonder whether they were enough. This is the day of your glory. That is what he told his soldiers. This is the day of your glory, a day on which, if you shed but a drop of blood, you will win for yourselves crowns of martyrdom and eternal fame. It is a fine sentence, the kind of sentence that survives in histories and is quoted in classrooms and inscribed on monuments. He meant it. He stood before Greeks and Genoese and Venetians and Catalans and Cretans, before men who spoke 4 different languages and served 4 different flags, and he told them that their differences did not matter. That tonight they were one thing, one body, one purpose. That what they were defending was not a city but an idea, the idea that a civilization could persist, could endure, could hold its walls against the dark even when the dark was vast and relentless and very, very patient. They believed him. He could see it in their faces. The Genoese captain Justiniani, who had sailed here with 700 men when he could have stayed home in safety, stood at the front and nodded. The Venetian sailors, who were far from their lagoon and their families and their comfortable counting houses, straightened their backs. The Greek militia, shopkeepers and fishermen and monastery servants who had never held a sword before 7 weeks ago, gripped their weapons a little tighter and lifted their chins. They believed him because he believed himself. And he did believe. Not in victory, he is not a fool, and the mathematics of this siege have been clear since the beginning. 8,000 defenders against 80,000 attackers. Walls cracked open like eggshells. No relief fleet. No Christian army marching east, despite the letters he has sent to every court in Europe, despite the promises that were made and broken and made again. He does not believe in victory. He believes in the act, the standing, the refusal to leave, to flee, to accept the Sultan's offer of safe passage in exchange for surrender. Mehmed offered him a kingdom elsewhere, a comfortable exile, a minor governorship, a life. Constantine refused, not because he wanted to die, but because he understood that some things are worth more than living, and one of those things is being the kind of person who does not abandon the people who depend on him. The difference between courage and hope. He thinks about this, perhaps, standing in the dim hall with his household's tears still drying on his armor. Courage does not require hope. Courage is what remains when hope has been used up, when every calculation says the cause is lost, and the walls will fall, and the morning will bring a different world. Hope is the belief that things might get better. Courage is the decision to act well even when they will not. Constantine has no hope. He has only duty. And love. Duty to the title he carries, Emperor of the Romans, a line unbroken since Augustus, and love for the city that has been the seat of that title for 1,100 years. Love for its stones and its churches and its people. Love for the dome of Hagia Sophia and the sea walls and the roses that bloom every May in the gardens of ruined palaces. Love for the old steward and the young page and the cook with flour on his arms. What does it mean to be the last of anything? The last emperor. The last Christian ruler of Constantinople. The last man to carry a title that stretches back through 11 centuries to the founding of this city, and further still, back through the emperors of Rome to the Republic, to the consuls, to the senators, to the farmers on the 7 hills who built the first walls and could not have imagined what those walls would grow to contain. It means that when you fall, no one will pick up what you carried. The weight you have borne, the weight of history, of obligation, of all those who came before will hit the ground when you do, and the sound it makes will echo. But no one will lift it again. Not ever. Constantine knows this. He has known it for weeks, perhaps for years. He is not the last emperor by accident. He is the last emperor by mathematics, by the slow, grinding arithmetic of decline that has been working against his empire for centuries, reducing its territory, its population, its wealth, its power, until all that remains is this city, these walls, this handful of exhausted men, and him. And still, he does not leave. He could, even now, on this last night, he could board a ship in the harbor and sail for Crete or Venice or Rome. He could live. He could grow old in exile and tell stories about the city he lost, and people would nod sympathetically and pour him more wine. No one would blame him. History would note it as a pragmatic decision, the act of a man who recognized the inevitable. But he stays, not because staying will change the outcome, but because the act of staying is the outcome. The choice itself is the thing that matters. The last emperor of Rome, choosing to die with his city rather than live without it. He stands in the flickering light of the hall, and the frescoes of dead emperors watch from the walls, and the night outside the windows is deep and full of stars, and somewhere beyond the walls, 80,000 men are preparing to kill him. He turns and walks toward the door. He has one more thing to do tonight. Around midnight, 2 horsemen ride out from the palace of Blockernai into the darkness. The first is Constantine. He has changed nothing about his appearance. The same armor, the same dented breastplate with the double-headed eagle, the same exhausted face. The second is George S. Francis, his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, a man who has known him since they were both young, and the empire, though diminished, still felt like something that might last. They ride south along the land walls, and the walls rise beside them in the moonlight like the spine of some vast, sleeping creature. The moon is past full. It hangs low over the Golden Horn, white and hard-edged, casting shadows so sharp they seem scored into the stone with a chisel. The light falls on the Theodosian Walls, on the massive inner wall with its 96 towers, on the lower outer wall, on the rubble-filled moat beyond, and reveals every scar. 7 weeks of bombardment have left their mark. Sections of the outer wall have collapsed entirely, reduced to slopes of broken masonry and dust. The great towers that once rose at regular intervals are cracked and leaning, some of them missing their upper stories, their crenellations bitten away by stone cannonballs as large as a man. In the breaches, the defenders have built stockades. Timber and earth and barrels packed with rubble, shored up with anything at hand, broken doors, church pews, the beams from collapsed houses. These improvised fortifications are rough and ugly, nothing like the elegant engineering of the original walls, but they hold. They have held for weeks. Every night, the cannon breaks them apart. Every night, the defenders rebuild. Constantine and S. Francis ride slowly. There is no hurry. The assault will come when it comes, and riding faster will not change the hour. Their horses' hooves sound soft on the packed earth of the road that runs inside the walls, a road worn to ruts by the passage of soldiers and supply wagons and the carts that carry earth to fill the breaches. The sound carries in the quiet night. Clop, 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 a rhythm as steady and unhurried as a pulse. Torches burn at intervals along the wall, mounted in iron brackets at the base of towers, their flames guttering in the light wind off the Marmara. The torchlight is orange and unsteady, reaching only a few yards in each direction before the darkness swallows it. Between the torches, the wall is a mass of shadow and moonlight, silver and black, the texture of the stone visible where the moon strikes it and invisible everywhere else. Soldiers are here. In the shadows of the towers, in the narrow passages between the inner and outer walls, on the platforms behind the crenellations. They sit or lean or crouch, and many of them are trying to sleep, heads resting on arms folded over drawn-up knees, bodies curled against the stone in positions that look nothing like comfort, but that exhaustion makes sufficient. Others are awake, staring outward into the dark beyond the walls, their eyes searching for movement in a blackness that offers none. When they see the emperor, they straighten, not all of them, not right away. Some are too tired or too deep in the fog between sleep and waking to register his presence. But those who do, those who recognize the silhouette on horseback, the glint of the double-headed eagle in the torchlight, they pull themselves upright and nod, or murmur a greeting, or simply watch him pass with the quiet attention of men who want to remember this. Constantine stops at each position. He speaks to the commanders. He asks about ammunition, about water, about the condition of the stockades. He does not give orders, the orders have been given, and the men who received them know what to do. He is not here to command. He is here to see and to be seen. To show the men on the walls that their emperor has not gone to bed, that he is here, in the dark, in the cold, sharing the same night they share. They ride past the gate of St. Romanus, where the fighting has been heaviest, where the great cannon has done its worst work. The stockade here is a ragged thing, timber and earth and the shattered remains of the outer wall, held together by the bodies of the men who rebuilt it every night under fire. The Lycus Valley opens below, a shallow depression that the river, little more than a stream, has carved over centuries, and the walls are lowest here, and weakest, and this is where the assault will hit hardest. Everyone knows this. The men stationed here are Justiniani's Genoese, and they sit behind the stockade with the practiced stillness of professional soldiers who know how to save their energy for the moment it will be needed. Further south, the wall is in better condition. The towers stand taller, the stone less damaged, but the men are fewer. There are not enough defenders to cover the full length of the land walls, and the sections that seem strongest are also the most thinly manned. Constantine notes this. Nothing to be done. He has sent letters to every Christian power in Europe, begging for reinforcements. The letters were received and read and discussed and filed, and no one came. They climb a tower near the palace of Blockernai. The stairway is narrow and spirals upward through the thickness of the wall, the steps worn smooth and slightly concave from centuries of feet. At the top, the night opens around them. The view stops you cold. Behind them, to the south and east, the city of Constantinople lies silver in the moonlight. The domes of churches rise from the dark mass of buildings like bubbles frozen in stone. The dome of Hagia Sophia is the largest, visible from here as a pale, luminous curve against the sky, catching the moonlight and holding it. The minarets that will one day surround it are not there yet. Tonight, the dome stands alone, the way it has stood for 9 centuries, a shape visible from every point in the city and from ships far out at sea. Smaller domes mark smaller churches, the Church of the Holy Apostles, the Church of Christ Pantocrator, the Church of the Theodicus Pamakaristos, each one a point of soft light where candles still burn and prayers still rise. Between them, the dark shapes of houses and gardens and empty lots, the overgrown quarters where no one lives anymore, the orchards that have reclaimed entire neighborhoods. And beyond the city, to the south and east, the water, the Sea of Marmara and the Golden Horn, silver dark under the moon, the reflections of stars scattered across their surfaces like coins dropped on black cloth. Ahead of them to the west, the Ottoman camp. It is dark. After the blazing fires of 2 nights ago, the camp is deliberately dark. Mehmed has ordered silence and darkness, and his army, 80,000 men spread across the plain beyond the moat, obeys. But it is not empty darkness. Something is there. Something is waiting. If you look long enough, your eyes begin to separate the camp from the plain around it, the slightly different shade of shadow where tents cluster, the faint gleam of metal where weapons are stacked, the occasional brief flare of a match or a torch quickly hooded. The camp breathes. You can almost hear it, the collective respiration of 80,000 men lying awake in the dark, thinking about dawn. Constantine and S. Francis stand on the tower in the moonlight and look at all of this, the city they love behind them, the army that will destroy it ahead, and they are quiet for a while. Their conversation is not recorded. S. Francis, who chronicled so much of Constantine's life with the careful attention of a man who understood that he was witnessing history, did not write down what they said to each other on this tower on this night. Perhaps the words were too private. Perhaps they were too ordinary. Perhaps S. Francis, who survived the fall and spent the rest of his life carrying the weight of having lived when his emperor died, could not bear to set them down in ink. But we can imagine. Two men who have known each other for decades, who have shared meals and arguments and the slow accumulation of years, standing on a cold tower in the middle of the night, looking out at the thing that is coming. They do not need to explain to each other what the morning will bring. They have been talking about it for weeks, for months, in the careful, indirect way that men talk about their own deaths when the deaths are still theoretical. Tonight the theory has become fact, and the indirectness is no longer necessary. Perhaps they talk about the past, about the years when the empire still held territory in the Peloponnese, when Constantine was a prince and not yet an emperor, and the future, though uncertain, was not yet this narrow. Perhaps they talk about people they have known, friends who died in earlier wars, advisors who counseled caution or boldness, the women they married and the children they fathered. Perhaps they talk about nothing important at all. The weather, the moon, whether the bread at dinner was stale. The last ordinary conversation between two friends. Or perhaps they are silent, standing together in the moonlight, shoulder to shoulder, needing no words. The night air cool on their faces, the smell of salt water and spring roses drifting up from the city, the distant sound of prayers from the churches below, faint and continuous, like the breathing of a sleeping child. The farewell, when it comes, is simple. They turn from the parapet. They descend the tower. In the courtyard below, their horses wait, patient, unaware, shifting their weight from hoof to hoof in the way of horses standing in the dark. Constantine faces S. Francis, and the two men clasp hands. It is not a handshake. It is the grip of two men who know they are touching for the last time, fingers interlocked, pressure firm, held longer than any ordinary farewell would warrant. Neither speaks. Or if they speak, the words are short and low and meant only for each other, lost in the sound of the wind along the walls. S. Francis mounts his horse. He turns south, toward whatever task Constantine has assigned him, the defense of the harbor, the coordination of the reserves, the business of war that continues even in the final hours. He rides away, and the sound of his horse's hooves fades into the darkness, and Constantine watches him go. The emperor is alone on the walls. He stands in the courtyard of the tower, the moonlight falling on his armor, and around him the ancient stones of the Theodosian Walls rise into the night, 1,000 years old, scarred by cannon, crumbling in places, but still standing. Still here, as he is still here. The night is very quiet now. The prayers from the churches have grown softer, or perhaps his ears have grown accustomed to them, and the sound has become part of the silence rather than a break in it. The waves against the sea walls, he can hear them, even from here, even from the land walls on the western side of the city. The constant, patient, unhurried sound of water against stone, the Marmara breathing. And beyond the walls, in the vast darkness of the Ottoman camp, something stirs. Not much, not yet. A distant drumbeat, so faint you might mistake it for your own pulse. Then another, separated by long seconds of silence. A rhythm gathering itself, testing its own nerve. The darkness, beyond the walls, begins to move. Word count, ~5000. You remember the moon. 6 nights ago, though it feels like months, though it feels like another lifetime, you stood on the sea walls and watched it rise. May the 22nd. The evening had been warm, and the air carried that particular sweetness of late spring along the Bosphorus, the smell of salt and flowering jasmine and the faintest trace of dust from the shattered walls to the west. The fishermen had pulled their boats in early. The Ottoman ships sat dark on the water, their hulls like the backs of sleeping animals. The moon rose over the hills of Asia. It rose wrong. You knew it the moment you saw it. Everyone did. The moon climbed above the horizon thin and sickly, a sliver where there should have been fullness, as though something had taken a bite from its edge and left the wound to bleed. For 4 hours it hung there, growing paler, shrinking into itself, the light draining out of it the way color drains from a face when the blood leaves. The watchers on the walls said nothing. The soldiers at their posts said nothing. There was nothing to say. They simply watched. The whole city watched. There is a prophecy. You have heard it since you were a child. the way you heard nursery rhymes and saints' stories, the way you learned the names of the apostles before you learned to count. Constantinople will not fall while the moon keeps faith. Constantinople will endure so long as the full moon shines whole and unblemished over its walls. One of those old promises that people repeat without quite believing. The way you might say the walls will hold forever, or the chain across the Golden Horn can never be broken, or the empire will last until the end of days. And now the moon was dying. For 4 hours it hung there, sick and strange. People gathered on the rooftops and in the courtyards and along the sea walls, and they watched without speaking. Mothers held children who had fallen asleep against their shoulders. Old men leaned on walking sticks and stared upward with faces gone slack and gray. Somewhere near the hippodrome, a woman began to weep, and the sound carried in the still air, thin and high, and no one told her to stop. Then the moon filled. Slowly, as if remembering itself, it swelled back toward fullness, but not to silver. It came back tinged with red. A blood moon hanging over Constantinople, over the dome of Hagia Sophia, over the broken walls and the empty neighborhoods and the gardens where roses bloomed in the rubble of abandoned houses. A moon the color of old copper. A moon that looked like a wound. The Ottomans saw it too. Across the dark fields beyond the walls, in that vast encampment of tents and cookfires and tethered horses, they saw the crescent shadow pass across the full circle, and they read it differently. The crescent eclipsing the circle. Islam passing over Christendom. A sign, a promise. Where the defenders saw doom, the besiegers saw destiny. In the city, the last embers of certainty went dark. The prophecy had spoken. The moon had given its sign. What had been feared was now foretold. You remember how, afterward, the streets grew quieter. How people walked a little more slowly, as though moving through water. How the bread merchants still opened their stalls in the morning, and the fishermen still went out into the Marmara, but there was a heaviness to everything, a weight that had not been there before. The air itself had thickened. The city had begun, without knowing it, to grieve for itself. 4 days later, the fog came. May the 26th. You woke to a world erased. Where the city should have been the domes, the columns, the great bulk of Hagia Sophia rising above everything, there was only white. A dense, clinging fog that pressed against the windows and muffled every sound and turned the streets into tunnels of gray nothing. You could not see 10 paces ahead. The walls vanished. The harbor vanished. The ships on the Golden Horn became ghosts, their masts dissolving upward into blankness. In 11 centuries, no one could remember fog like this in May. Constantinople in late spring is a city of clear skies and warm light, of blue water and sharp shadows and evenings so transparent you can see the mountains of Asia from the sea walls. Fog belongs to winter, to the short dark days when the Bosphorus churns and the fishermen stay home. Not to May, not to the season of roses. But the fog came. It sat on the city like a hand pressed over a mouth. It filled the empty neighborhoods where no one lived, drifting through the broken doorways of abandoned houses, settling in the overgrown gardens, wrapping itself around the trunks of the fig trees that had seated themselves in what had once been someone's kitchen. It crept along the Theodosian Walls, obscuring the sentries from each other, so that a man standing watch could hear the soldier 20 paces to his left, but could not see him. It hung over the moat where the bodies of the first week's fighting had been buried under rubble and fill, and it carried with it a smell, not quite decay, not quite the sea, but something between the two. Something old and cold and final. People stayed indoors. The markets did not open. The churches held their services, but the congregations were smaller, and the hymns sounded muffled, as though the fog had gotten inside the walls and was pressing down on the voices of the faithful. Then, as evening fell and the fog began, at last, reluctantly, to thin, something happened that no one could explain. A light appeared on the dome of Hagia Sophia. Not candlelight from within, not the reflection of a torch. A flame, a large, crawling flame that seemed to issue from the base of the dome itself, wrapping around the great curved neck of the structure the way fire wraps around a log, circling it, embracing it, burning without burning. Those who saw it from the streets below described it afterward in different ways. Some said it was red, others said blue. A few swore it shifted and pulsed like something alive. All of them agreed on what happened next. The flame gathered itself, it rose, it lifted away from the dome and climbed straight up into the darkening sky. Gone. Silence, then the sound of weeping. Again, the sound of weeping. It seems to you that this city has done nothing but weep for days. The Holy Spirit has left us. That is what they said in the churches afterward, kneeling in the candlelight, their faces drawn and hollow. The Holy Spirit has departed from the city. The light of God has risen from Hagia Sophia and returned to heaven, and we are left alone. On the far side of the world, though no one in Constantinople will ever know this, a volcano called Kui has torn itself apart. An island in the South Pacific has exploded with a force that dwarfs anything the Great Cannon could dream of, and the ash and dust and sulfur from that eruption have drifted into the upper atmosphere and spread across the globe, dimming the sun, reddening the moon, conjuring fog where no fog should be, and strange lights in skies that should be clear. Science, centuries from now, will offer this explanation, precise, verifiable, entirely true. But you are not a scientist. You are a person standing in the street below Hagia Sophia, watching a flame rise from the dome of the greatest church in Christendom and vanish into the sky. And what you know, what you feel in your chest like a stone, is that God has gone. That you are alone in this city now. That the walls and the chain and the soldiers on the ramparts are all that remain between you and the dark, and the walls have holes in them, and the chain did not stop the ships, and the soldiers are so few. So terribly few. You go home, you bolt the door, you light a candle in front of your icon of the Theotokos, the Virgin, the protectress of the city, she who has turned back armies before. The flame gutters in a draught you cannot feel. You pray. The words come, familiar as breathing. But tonight, they feel like stones dropped into a well, falling and making no sound when they hit the bottom. That same night, the fog had thinned but not lifted entirely, and the air was damp and strange, and you stood on the walls, or you knew someone who stood on the walls and told you afterward, because word spreads fast in a city this small, this frightened, and you looked out toward the Ottoman camp. The world caught fire. It began with a single blaze, somewhere near the center of Mehmed's encampment, and then another, and within the hour the entire ring of hills and fields surrounding Constantinople was alight. Bonfires, enormous bonfires, fed with timber and pitch, and whatever would burn sprang up across the plain until the defenders on the walls had to shield their eyes. The darkness vanished. The night turned orange and gold and trembling, and the light was so strong, so overwhelming, that those who witnessed it said it seemed to be day. As if someone had peeled back the night and let the noon sun pour through. With the fire came sound. Tens of thousands of voices. A chanting that rose from every quarter of that vast encampment, from the Janissary barracks and the cavalry lines and the artillery positions and the tent cities that stretched back for miles along the roads leading west. The words were a prayer, and the prayer was a promise, and the promise was the same word repeated over and over. The name of God, the name of the prophet, the name of the sultan who had sworn to take this city or die before its walls. The chanting swelled until the stones of the Theodosian Walls seemed to vibrate with it, and the defenders standing on those walls could feel it in their teeth, in their ribs, in the soles of their feet where they pressed against the ancient stone. The sky itself seemed ready to split open. The ring of fire spread along the horizon. Every hilltop, every ridge, every field lit and blazing and alive with moving figures, and the shadows of moving figures, thousands upon thousands of men silhouetted against the flames, their weapons glinting, their banners snapping in the heated air. The noise, the drums and the horns and the voices merged into a single sound that was no longer human, just volume, just force, the sound of something enormous and unstoppable announcing itself to the night. Then it stopped. Toward midnight, as though a hand had closed over the mouth of the world, the fires went out. One by one, and then all at once, the blazes were doused and the darkness came flooding back, sudden and absolute. The chanting ceased. The drums fell silent. The horns did not sound. The cannon, which had fired every day for 7 weeks, whose rhythm the defenders had learned the way you learn the rhythm of your own pulse, did not fire. Nothing. The silence was a physical thing. It pressed against the walls like the fog had pressed against them that morning. It filled the spaces between the sentries, and it crept into the streets and the churches and the houses where women sat awake with their children, and it settled into every room and every chest and every sleepless mind in the city. May the 27th. The next day dawned clear and quiet, and the Ottoman camp was still. No bombardment, no assault, no probing attacks against the walls. Mehmed had declared a day of rest, of prayer and fasting, and his army, all 80,000 of them, simply stopped. For the defenders, this was worse. Far worse. 7 weeks of cannon fire had become the texture of their lives. The great cannons spoke 7 times a day, and each time the earth shook and the walls cracked and the dust rose in choking clouds, and it was horrible, but it was known. You understood it. You could brace for it. You knew that when the cannon fired, the walls might break, but when the cannon was silent, when the cannon was silent and the drums were silent and the fires were out and the army was praying, that meant something else entirely. That meant they were ready. That meant tomorrow. The soldiers on the walls spent the day repairing what they could. The stockade in the Lycus Valley, that improvised barricade of timber and earth-filled barrels that stood where the great cannon had reduced the stone wall to rubble, was shored up and braced and reinforced, and the men who did the work moved with a careful, deliberate slowness, as though if they moved slowly enough the next day might not come. Women carried water and food to the walls. Children helped fill barrels with dirt. The churches remained full. The prayers did not stop. The silence continued. Hour after hour after hour. A silence so complete that you could hear the sea from the center of the city. A silence in which the song of a bird became an event, and the barking of a dog in an empty quarter made people turn their heads and listen, straining for what might come after. Nothing came after, not yet, not until midnight. And now it is now. You are here, the late hours of May the 28th. Past midnight, though you could not say by how much time has gone strange, the way it does when you have not slept, when you have passed through fear into something beyond fear, something quiet and hollow and almost peaceful. The stars are out. You can see them from where you stand, wherever you stand, on the walls or in the streets or at the window of a darkened house, because the city has gone dark. The torches on the walls burn low. The candles in the churches have guttered to stubs. The oil lamps that lit the windows of the wealthier houses have been allowed to go out, or have run dry, or have simply been forgotten in the long, strange hours of this long, strange night. And without their small human light, the stars have come forward, hard and bright and indifferent, the way stars always are, and the sky above Constantinople is deeper and wider than you have seen it in weeks. The spring air is warm, clear. The fog is gone, the clouds are gone, the atmospheric strangeness of the past days has passed, and what remains is a night of almost painful clarity. You can smell the roses. They are blooming everywhere in the gardens of the wealthy, yes, but also in the abandoned lots and the ruined courtyards and the overgrown spaces where houses once stood. Wild roses, climbing the crumbling walls of neighborhoods that no one has lived in for decades. Their scent drifts through the empty streets and mingles with the salt air from the Marmara and the last traces of incense seeping from the church doors. Beautiful. So beautiful it hurts, the way beautiful things always hurt when you know they are ending. Somewhere in an overgrown courtyard near the old palace of the Porphyrogitis, a nightingale is singing. You can hear it because there is nothing else to hear. The bird does not know what night this is. It knows only the warmth and the darkness and the instinct that tells it to sing, and so it sings, a liquid, tumbling cascade of notes that spills over the broken walls and the tangled rose vines and the sleeping cats and the still water of a fountain that has not flowed in years. The most ordinary sound in the world. Tonight it sounds like a farewell. The sea washes gently against the walls. You can hear that too, the soft, rhythmic lapping of the Marmara against the southern sea walls, and the quieter sound of the Golden Horn against the northern ones, and beneath those sounds, if you listen very carefully, the deep, low creak of the great chain stretching across the harbor mouth. The chain that is held. The chain that still holds. The water moves against it, and the iron links shift and settle, and the sound is like an old man breathing in his sleep. The Theodosian Walls rise in the darkness to the west. You cannot see them clearly, they are too far if you are in the city's center, or too close if you are standing on them, but you can feel them. They have been there for 1,000 years. They have held back the Avars and the Arabs and the Bulgars and the Rus, and they have cracked and crumbled and been repaired and cracked again, and they are scarred now in ways they have never been scarred before, whole sections reduced to rubble, the great towers shattered and leaning, the moat choked with debris. But they are there. They still stand. The soldiers still stand on them. 3,000 men along 6.5 kilometers of fortification, spaced so far apart that between each pair of defenders there is a gap of darkness wide enough for a dozen men to slip through unseen. But they are there. Beyond the walls, in the vast darkness to the west and the north and the south, in the fields and hills and coastline that surround this city on 3 sides, 80,000 men are waking. You cannot see them, not yet, but if you are on the walls, if you are one of those 3,000 standing in the dark with your hands on a sword or a crossbow or a jar of Greek fire, you can feel them. The way you feel a storm approaching before the first cloud appears. The way you feel someone watching you from a darkened room, the air has changed. There is a vibration in the ground beneath your feet, so faint that you are not sure if you are feeling it or imagining it, and you hold very still, and you press your palm flat against the cold stone of the parapet, and you wait. The vibration is real. It is the movement of thousands of men, the shifting of artillery, the rolling of great wheeled towers and siege ladders through soft earth, the muffled clink of armor being buckled and swords being drawn from scabbards and shields being lifted from the ground where they have rested all day. It comes up through the foundations of the walls, through 1,000 years of stone and mortar, and it reaches your hand, and it tells you what you already know. They are coming. The nightingale has stopped singing. You did not notice when. The roses still bloom in the dark, their petals open and soft, their fragrance drifting across the city like a blessing given to no one in particular. The stars burn overhead. The sea moves against the walls. And the silence, the terrible, beautiful, unbearable silence that has lasted all day and all evening and into these smallest hours of the night, begins to crack. A trumpet far away, so far that you are not sure you heard it, you hold your breath, you listen. Another trumpet, closer, then a drum. A single drum beating a rhythm that is not fast, not slow, but steady, steady as a pulse, steady as the march of men who have been told they will take this city before the sun rises. More drums, more trumpets. The sound builds the way a wave builds, gathering from far out at sea, drawing the water up and up until it curls and breaks. With the sound comes the trembling, the earth itself trembling, the ancient walls trembling, the stones that have stood for a millennium shaking in their mortar as the ground beneath them comes alive with the footsteps of an army. The torches along the Ottoman line ignite. 1, then 10, then 100, then 1,000, a line of fire stretching across the darkness from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara, curving around the city like a closing fist. Behind that line of fire shapes, the shapes of men. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, more men than the city holds, more men than the city has held in decades. Surging forward out of the darkness, their weapons catching the torchlight, their voices rising in a roar that swallows the drums and the trumpets and the nightingale and the waves and every other sound that has ever been made in this place. The earth trembles, the walls tremble, your hands tremble. It has begun. Word count. The darkness comes alive. One moment you are standing on the walls in the silence and the starlight, your hand on cold stone, your breath shallow, your ears straining toward the rumble of drums in the distance. Then the distance closes. It is here. The dark field between the outer moat and the Ottoman lines fills with shapes that were not there a heartbeat ago, that have materialized out of the night the way nightmares materialize out of sleep. Suddenly, completely, without warning. 50,000 men. You cannot count them, you cannot see them clearly. They are a tide, a dark, surging, roaring tide of bodies and weapons and torchlight, pouring forward across the broken ground toward the walls where you stand. The drums are deafening now. The trumpets scream. And the men, the bashy bazooks, the irregulars, the first wave, they scream too. A sound that is not one voice but 50,000 voices merged into something that has no words, only force, only volume. Only the raw and animal cry of men who have been driven forward into the dark. This is what you see, if you can see anything at all. The moat is below you, wide, partially filled with rubble and earth from weeks of Ottoman labor, but still deep enough to slow a man, to trap him, to drown him if he falls wrong. Beyond the moat, the killing ground. And beyond that, filling every inch of visible space between here and the fires of the Ottoman camp, men. Running. Carrying ladders and hooks and ropes and shields and swords and bows and things that are not weapons at all, clubs and sharpened sticks and stones, because the bashy bazooks are not soldiers. Not really. Not most of them. They are the expendable ones. Christians and Germans and Hungarians and adventurers from a dozen countries, fighting for pay or plunder or because they had no other choice, armed with whatever they could find or carry or steal, and they have been sent forward first for a reason that everyone understands and no one says aloud. They are here to tire you, to use up your arrows and your Greek fire and your strength, so that when the real soldiers come, the Anatolians, the Janissaries, you will have nothing left. Behind the bashy bazooks, visible in the shifting torchlight, stand the officers. Turkish chaoses with iron maces and loaded whips. Their job is simple. Any man who turns back, any man who hesitates, any man who tries to flee the killing ground and return to the safety of the Ottoman lines, they beat him. Break his legs. Drive him forward again with blows that leave welts the width of a finger. Behind the chaoses stand the Janissaries, the elite, the untouchable, and their orders are simpler still. Anyone who retreats past the officers dies. A sword through the back. No trial, no appeal. The bashy bazooks fight because they must. They go forward because forward is the only direction that does not guarantee death. And you stand behind the stockade in the Lycus Valley, that improvised wall of timber and rubble and earth-filled barrels that has replaced the shattered stone, and you fight. How do you fight 50,000 men with 3,000? You fight them at the narrow place. The stockade is a bottleneck, a choke point, and the men cannot come at you all at once. They come in clusters, in knots, scrambling over the rubble and the wreckage of the outer wall, hauling their ladders up against the stockade, reaching the top only to meet the blades and the stones and the fire that the defenders pour down on them. Greek fire arcs into the night, that ancient, terrible weapon, the liquid flame that burns on water and clings to skin and cannot be doused. And where it lands, the darkness blooms orange and the screams change pitch, become something higher and wilder. Crossbow bolts hiss outward into the mass of bodies. Stones dropped from the towers crash into men below with sounds you try not to think about. And the defenders, Greeks, Genoese, Venetians, Catalans, monks who have picked up swords, merchants who have never held a weapon before tonight, they stand shoulder to shoulder behind the timber and they fight. Because there is nowhere else to go. Because no one else will do it. An hour passes. It does not feel like an hour. It feels like a single breath drawn and held and never released. Your arms burn. Your shoulders ache with a pain that goes deeper than muscle, deeper than bone, a weariness that seems to radiate from the center of your body outward. The man beside you has been cut, a slash across the forearm that bleeds freely. He has tied a strip of cloth around it without stopping, without even looking down, because there is no time to look down. Only the next ladder. The next face appearing above the rim of the stockade. The next pair of hands grasping for a hold. Another hour, the moat is filling, not with water, with the dead and the dying tumbled there by the press of bodies behind them, pushed forward and over the edge by the sheer weight of men still coming. Some of them are not dead. You can hear them in the gaps between the roaring, the groans, the calls for help in languages you do not speak, the wet, choking sounds of men who have fallen badly and cannot rise. You try not to listen. You cannot afford to listen. You swing your sword or your axe or whatever is in your hand, and you do the thing you have to do, and you try to think of nothing, just the movement, the rhythm, the next second and the second after that. Then, like a wave that has spent itself against a breakwater, the bashy bazooks break. It does not happen all at once. It begins at the edges where the fighting is thinnest, where a man can turn without being seen by the officers behind him. One man turns, then 10, then 100. The tide reverses. The screaming changes, no longer the scream of attack, but the scream of retreat, of men trying to get away from the walls and the fire and the blades, trying to get back across the killing ground and the moat and the rubble, tripping over the bodies of their own dead, stumbling in the dark. The chaoses meet them with maces. The Janissaries meet them with swords. But the route is too wide, too complete, and the first wave washes backward and is gone. Silence, a relative silence. The drums have paused. The trumpets have gone quiet. But the moat is not quiet. It is full of the sounds of the wounded, and those sounds fill the night like a second kind of weather, a storm that will not pass. You lean against the stockade. Your legs are shaking. Your hands are shaking. The sword, or the axe, or the crossbow, or whatever you held for 2 hours without letting go, feels welded to your palm. You try to open your fingers and they do not want to open. The man beside you has sat down on the ground with his back against a barrel of earth, and his head is tipped back, and his mouth is open, and he is breathing in great ragged gulps as though he has just surfaced from deep water. The stockade holds. Battered, scarred, missing sections where the ladders struck and the weight of men pressed inward, but it holds. The timber is cracked and the barrels have shifted and the whole structure leans at an angle that it did not lean at 2 hours ago, but it holds. You have won this round, 3,000 against 50,000, and you have held. But your arms are so heavy, and the night is only half spent. 15 minutes. Perhaps less. You will never know exactly how long the pause lasts, because time has lost its edges, because everything has blurred into a single smeared sensation of exhaustion and fear, and the copper taste of blood, your own blood, or someone else's, you cannot tell and it does not matter. What you hear, the wounded in the moat, their sounds are terrible and you cannot shut them out. A man calling for water. A man calling for his mother, in a language that might be Hungarian. The word is the same in every language, the first word anyone learns and the last word many people speak. The snap of torches along the wall, where the flames gutter in a breeze that carries the smell of the sea. The murmur of prayers, someone near you is praying, the words running together into a single low hum, like the drone of a beehive, like the sound a building makes when the wind passes through its empty rooms. What you smell, smoke, thick and acrid from the Greek fire and the burning pitch and the gunpowder. Blood, the sweet, metallic, unmistakable scent of it, pooling on the stones and soaking into the packed earth behind the stockade. Dust, the fine gray dust of pulverized mortar that coats everything, your hair, your armor, the inside of your mouth. And beneath it all, faint and impossible but there, the roses from the abandoned gardens. The spring air carries their fragrance over the city, over the walls, into this place of ruin, and it reaches you like a hand on your forehead. Cool, soft, utterly out of place. A figure moves along the line. You know him by his bearing before you can see his face, the set of his shoulders, the way he walks, unhurried even now, even here. Constantine. He has been fighting like everyone else. His armor is dented and dark with grime, his face blackened with smoke and dust, and there is blood on his gauntlet, his own, someone else's, it does not matter. He stops at each man. He speaks. You cannot hear the words, but you can see the effect, a straightening of spines, a firming of jaws, a small and barely perceptible stiffening in men who a moment ago looked ready to fold. He reaches you, he says something. His voice is hoarse. You do not remember the words afterward. You remember his eyes. Dark, steady, impossibly calm. The eyes of a man who has already made his peace with what is coming, who has passed through fear into the country on the other side of it and found there a quietness that cannot be shaken. He moves on, the next man, the next. The thin gray line of defenders stretched along the broken stockade, each one a universe of pain and terror and stubbornness, each one still here, still standing, still holding a weapon they can barely lift. The emperor walks among them the way a father walks through a house at night, checking the locks, checking the windows, making sure the world is safe for one more hour. It is not safe, you know this. But for these 15 minutes, in this pause between the waves, you breathe. You lean against the stockade and close your eyes and feel the cool night air on your face. You breathe. They come out of the darkness, dressed in armor. The Bashi Bazouks were a ragged tide, armed with scraps and driven by whips. These men are different. You can see it in the way they move, ordered, disciplined, shoulder to shoulder in ranks that do not waver. The torchlight catches the glint of breastplates, of helms, of sword blades held at the same angle by 1,000 hands trained to hold them so. The Anatolian infantry. Regulars. Men who have drilled and fought and bled in a dozen campaigns across Asia Minor. Men who do not need to be driven forward by officers with maces, because they go forward on their own. Because it is what they are. Because the discipline has been burned into them so deeply that it has replaced whatever else they used to be. They do not scream, not the way the Bashi Bazouks screamed. They come in a kind of grim, focused silence, and that silence is worse. It means they are not afraid. Men who are not afraid do not break. This time, the cannon speaks with them. The great cannon, Orban's monster, 27 feet of bronze throat that has been roaring at these walls for 7 weeks, fires in coordination with the infantry advance. You feel it before you hear it. The ground shakes. The stockade shudders. A sound fills the world, not a sound exactly, but a pressure, a physical force that compresses the air and squeezes your chest and makes your vision swim. Then the impact. Somewhere to your left, a section of the stockade ceases to exist. Where there was timber and earth and barrels packed tight, there is now a gap. A ragged, smoking hole, 10 feet wide, filled with dust and falling debris and the echoes of something that sounded like the end of the world. 300 men pour through. Turkish soldiers, armored and armed, surging through the breach before the dust has settled, before the defenders can turn, before anyone fully grasps what has happened. They are inside the enclosure now, inside the narrow space between the ruined outer wall and the inner wall behind it, and they fan out with the speed of water finding its level, filling every gap, pressing against the defenders from a direction that was supposed to be safe. Hand to hand, the ugliest phrase in the language of war and the most honest. There is no distance now. No arrows, no Greek fire, no stones dropped from above. Only the man in front of you and the weapon in your hand and the space between your body and his, which is no space at all. You can smell his breath. You can see the whites of his eyes. You can hear the sound his armor makes when your blade strikes it. A dull, ringing clang that travels up your arm and into your shoulder and lodges there like a second wound. The fighting in the breach is beyond description. It happens in a space so narrow and so choked with dust and smoke that you cannot see more than a few feet in any direction, and what you see in those feet is enough: the flash of blades, the spray of blood, the terrible, intimate, graceless struggle of men trying to kill each other at arm's length. No glory, no strategy. Only bodies pressed together in the dark, and the sounds they make, and the way the ground becomes slick beneath your feet with things you do not want to name. But the breach is sealed. Somehow, through some combination of courage and desperation and the simple refusal of exhausted men to take one more step backward, the defenders push the Anatolians back. The 300 who entered are killed or driven out. Fresh timber and rubble are hauled into the gap. The stockade, shattered and leaning and held together by nothing more than stubbornness, is patched. The Anatolians fall back. The cost is terrible. Along the stockade, the defenders are fewer now. Gaps have opened in the line, gaps that were men an hour ago, men with names and families and faces, men who stood where you are standing and who are not standing anymore. The wounded sit against the inner wall with their armor loosened and their hands pressed against cuts and punctures they cannot see in the dark. Some of them will not get up again. Some of them know it. Dawn is coming. You can see it, or you think you can, at the far eastern edge of the sky, where the water of the Marmara meets the horizon. A thin gray line. Not light exactly. Not yet. But the promise of light, the suggestion that somewhere beyond this night, beyond these walls, beyond this horror, the sun still exists and will rise again, as it has risen every morning for as long as mornings have been. The drums have stopped. The Anatolians have withdrawn. The moat is deeper now, filled with the wreckage of 2 waves, and the smell rising from it is something you will carry with you for the rest of your life, however long that turns out to be. You lean against the stockade. You try to flex your fingers. They barely move. Your sword arm hangs at your side like something that belongs to someone else. Dawn is coming. If you can hold until dawn, if the walls hold and the stockade holds and the men hold for a few more hours, then perhaps. The Ottoman army fights by night and rests by day, and if the sun rises on walls that are still defended, Mehmed will have to regroup, and there will be another day, and another night, and another chance. Dawn is coming. But so is the 3rd wave. In the chaos of the 2nd wave, or in the brief, gasping pause after it, the accounts disagree and it does not matter, because what matters is not when it happened, but that it happened. Giovanni Giustiniani is struck. He has been here since January. The Genoese captain who arrived with 700 professional soldiers and a reputation forged in the siege wars of the Mediterranean, who was given command of the most critical section of the defense, the land walls in the Lycus Valley, where the great cannon has done its worst, and who has held that section for 7 weeks through skill and stubbornness and the kind of calm, unshakable competence that other men mistake for courage. He has been the rock, the anchor. The one fixed point in a defense that has been improvised and desperate from the start. When the walls cracked, he repaired them. When the stockade broke, he rebuilt it. When the men faltered, he stood in the gap and fought until they found their nerve. He is the reason the walls have held this long. Everyone knows it. The emperor knows it. The Turks know it. Something finds him. A crossbow bolt, some say, fired from below, slipping between the plates of his armor and lodging in his chest or arm or side. A fragment of stone, others say, shattered by a cannonball and flung sideways with the force of a thrown spear. The accounts differ. What does not differ is the blood. Bright and sudden and too much of it, spreading across his armor, soaking the cloth beneath, running down his leg and pooling on the stones where he stands. He staggers, the men around him catch him. The word spreads in seconds. Giustiniani is hit. Giustiniani is wounded. Giustiniani is bleeding. Constantine comes. You can see him in the torchlight, the emperor, pressing through the crowd of soldiers, reaching the Genoese captain, gripping his arm. His face is urgent. His voice cuts through the din with the sharpness of a man who understands exactly what is about to happen. Stay, your wound is slight. Stay. If you leave now, the line breaks. Do you understand? If you leave, it is over. Everything. The walls, the city, the empire, all of it, it rests on whether you stay or go. Stay, please stay. Giustiniani cannot hear him, or will not. The pain has closed around him like a fist, and the blood is still coming, and whatever calm and steadiness he possessed for 7 weeks has cracked open, and what is pouring out is not courage, but the simple, animal terror of a man who has been badly hurt and wants to get away from the place where he was hurt. He demands the keys. The keys to the small gate in the inner wall, the gate he himself ordered installed, the gate that leads from the enclosure to the relative safety of the city behind it. He demands the keys, and his voice is high and hoarse and nothing like the voice he has used for 7 weeks, and Constantine looks at him and sees in his face something that cannot be argued with. The keys are given, the gate opens, Justiniani is carried through. His Genoese see him go. They see their captain, their rock, their anchor, the man they followed across the sea to this place, the man who told them they would hold these walls, carried away from the stockade, through the gate, into the city. The gate closes behind him. And in their minds, in the minds of 700 professional soldiers who have fought and bled for 7 weeks in a foreign city for a foreign emperor, a calculation takes place. If he is leaving, then it is finished. If the captain has gone, the defense is over. If Justiniani, who has never retreated, who has never flinched, who has stood in the breach when everyone else wanted to run, if even he is leaving, then there is nothing left to hold. The whisper moves faster than a man can run. He's gone, it's over, the Turks have got in, he's gone. The Genoese break. Not all of them, some stay, some fight on, some die where they stand. But enough of them break. Enough turn from the stockade and rush for the gate in the inner wall, pushing and shoving and climbing over each other in the dark, jamming the narrow passage with armored bodies, trampling the fallen, clawing at the stones. The gate becomes a bottleneck of panic. Men who moments ago were holding the line are now fighting each other to get through a door. Behind them, along the stockade, a section of the defense goes dark. The torches burn, the timber stands, but the men who held it are gone. A gap opens in the wall of flesh and iron that has kept the Ottoman army at bay for 7 hours, and no one fills it. In the Blockerney quarter, at the northern end of the Theodosian Walls, where the fortifications curve inward toward the Golden Horn and the Palace district, there is a gate. Not much of a gate. A postern, a small, narrow door set low in the wall, partly below ground level, built centuries ago for reasons that no one alive remembers. The Kirkaporta. For years, for decades, perhaps, it was bricked up and forgotten, sealed behind masonry, its very existence fading from memory the way so many things in this diminished city have faded. A gate that led nowhere. A door no one used. During the siege, someone remembered it. Someone reopened it. It became a sally port, a door through which small groups of defenders could slip out at night for quick, desperate raids against the Ottoman positions, striking fast and retreating before the enemy could respond. After each sortie, the gate was to be closed, sealed, barred and bolted and forgotten again until the next time. Tonight, someone forgot. Perhaps it was the chaos. Perhaps it was the darkness and the noise and the smoke, and the man whose job it was to bar the gate was killed or wounded or pulled away to fight, and in the terrible calculus of too few men and too many emergencies, the Kirkaporta simply slipped through. A small door. An old door. A door that had been forgotten before and might have been forgotten again if the night had gone differently. The Ottomans find it. A group of soldiers, Janissaries, perhaps 50 of them, moving along the base of the wall in the pre-dawn darkness, looking for weaknesses, probing every crack and shadow and irregularity in the ancient stone. They find the door. It is open, or ajar, or simply not barred. They push through. They are inside. Inside the walls. Inside the city. The walls that have held for 1,000 years, the walls that have turned back every army that ever stood before them, and 50 men have walked through a door that someone forgot to close. They move quickly, through the narrow postern, into a passage between the outer and inner walls, and then, through a neighboring gate barely 30 yards away, into the city itself. They do not stop to plunder. They do not scatter. They go upward. They climb the nearest tower, pull down the Byzantine standard that has flown from it since before any of them were born, and raise in its place the banner of the Ottoman Sultan. The defenders on the wall see it. The Turkish flag behind them, not in front, where the enemy has always been, but behind, inside, above. The flag snapping in the pre-dawn breeze on a tower that was theirs an hour ago. The cry goes up, the cry that travels the length of the wall faster than any messenger, faster than any horse, the cry that breaks what is left of the defense as completely and as finally as the great cannon broke the stone. The city is taken. The city is taken. It is not taken, not yet, not entirely, but the cry is enough. The cry is a weapon more devastating than any cannon, because it strikes at the one thing that has kept 3,000 exhausted men fighting through a night of slaughter, the belief that the walls can hold. That belief is gone now. The walls have been breached. The Turks are inside. One by one, then in clusters, then in a flooding rush, the defenders begin to leave their posts. Dawn. The sky above the Sea of Marmara has turned from black to gray to the palest, most fragile shade of rose, and the light is spreading westward across the water, catching the hulls of the Ottoman ships and the ancient stones of the sea walls and the dome of Hagia Sophia, which glows for a moment, just a moment, with the same golden light it has caught every morning for 900 years. Into that light, 12,000 Janissaries advance on the broken stockade. They are the finest soldiers in the known world. Recruited as boys from Christian families across the Balkans, raised in military schools, trained from childhood in a discipline so complete that it leaves no room for fear or hesitation or mercy. They wear white felt caps and carry short, curved swords and bows of layered horn, and they move with a precision that is almost beautiful, rank upon rank, shoulder to shoulder, a human wall advancing on a wall of stone. Mehmed himself commands. The Sultan, 21 years old, slight, dark-eyed, obsessed with this city since he was a boy drawing maps of its walls by candlelight, stands behind his Janissaries and watches them advance, and he promises them everything. Gold and glory and the plunder of the richest city in the world, promotion and honor and the Sultan's personal favor. He promises reward to the first man who gains a position on the wall. He promises, and they believe him, because he has never lied to them, and because the wall ahead is crumbling and the defense is crumbling with it. Trumpets, fifes, and drums sound their loudest. The noise carries across the Bosphorus to the Asian shore, where fishermen in their huts hear it and know what it means. The noise fills the sky, fills the city, fills the empty neighborhoods and the abandoned houses and the churches where women and children press together in the candlelight and pray. A man named Hassan reaches the top of the wall. The chronicles describe him as a giant, a man of extraordinary size, broad as a doorway, carrying a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. He scrambles up the rubble of the broken stockade ahead of every other man, reaches the top, and stands there for a moment, silhouetted against the pale sky, his white cap bright against the gray, and he fights. Alone, for a few seconds or a few minutes or an eternity that is both, the chronicles compress time, and time in battle is unreliable anyway. He holds the top of the wall by himself, cutting down the defenders who come at him, absorbing blows that would fell an ordinary man, refusing to go down. Others join him. 5, 10, 30 Janissaries clambering up in his wake, following the path he has carved. 18 are killed, cut down and thrown back into the rubble. But more come, and more. And more. The defenders are caught now between two forces. From the front, the Janissaries scaling the stockade, pouring over the top in an unending stream. From the rear, the soldiers who came through the Kirkaporta, who have spread along the inside of the walls and are cutting into the defenders from behind. The thin line that has held all night is caught between hammer and anvil, and it is fraying. You can feel it fray. Not all at once, not a clean snap, like a rope pulled too tight. A man steps back. Another turns to look behind him and sees Turkish flags where Byzantine flags should be. A third simply sits down, his legs gone, his strength gone, the last thread of will snapped by the sight of armored men pouring over the wall he has been defending since midnight. The line unravels. The sections that held longest, the Genoese who stayed when their captain left, the Greeks who had lived in this city all their lives, the Venetians who sailed here for reasons of commerce and stayed for reasons of honor, these sections hold a few minutes longer. Then they, too, give way. 30,000 Ottoman soldiers pour through the walls in the time it takes a candle to burn from wick to stump. They flood into the enclosure, over the rubble, through the gaps, around the shattered towers, and into the city beyond. The sound of their entry is not battle anymore. Battle implies two sides. This is something else, a flood, a collapse, the sound of something vast and old and irreplaceable coming apart at the seams. The stockade, that improvised wall of timber and earth that held for 7 hours against everything the Ottoman army could throw at it, stands empty now. The torches still burn along its length. The stones are dark with blood. A sword lies on the ground where someone dropped it, its blade notched and dull. A shield rests against a barrel, its face caved in. The wind stirs a scrap of cloth, a banner, perhaps, or a piece of a cloak. These are the remains. This is what a defense looks like when the defenders are gone. Beyond the stockade, beyond the walls, the city lies open. Constantinople, city of domes and columns, of golden mosaics and ancient prayers, of roses blooming in abandoned gardens and moonlight on the Golden Horn, lies open to the army that has wanted it for 100 years, that has dreamed of it and planned for it and bled for it, and that is now, at last, pouring through its broken gates. The sound of battle fades. It does not stop, not entirely, not yet, but it recedes, the way a storm recedes when it has passed overhead and is moving on. The roaring and the screaming and the clash of steel thin and scatter, replaced by something quieter, and in its quietness, worse. The silence of a city falling. Not true silence. There are sounds, running feet, distant shouts, the crack of doors being broken, the wail of someone discovering what has happened. But these sounds are scattered and small against the enormity of what has occurred, and between them there are gaps, and in those gaps you hear the things that were always there and will always be there. The sea, washing against the walls. The wind, moving through the streets. The birds, sparrows and swallows and starlings, beginning to sing, because dawn has come and the birds do not care what dawn has brought. The roses are still blooming. In every garden, in every abandoned courtyard, in every crack in every ruined wall where a root has found its way into the earth, the spring roses of Constantinople open their petals to the first light. Their scent fills the air, mixes with the smoke and the dust and the other smells, the smells of what has happened here tonight, and it endures. It will endure. Long after the smoke clears and the dust settles and the blood dries on the ancient stones. The roses will bloom again next May, and the May after that, and every May for centuries to come, in a city that will have a different name and different prayers and different flags on its towers, but the same sky overhead, and the same sea at its walls, and the same stubborn, impossible roses climbing from the rubble. Word count, ~6 980. There is a moment in every collapse when one person chooses not to run. You have seen it before in burning buildings, in sinking ships, in the last hour of any desperate thing. The crowd surges backward. The line buckles. The bravest men look at one another and see their own fear reflected back. In that moment, someone steps forward. Not because they believe they will survive, not because they have a plan, because the stepping forward is the only thing left that belongs to them. Giovanni Giustiniani is gone. Carried through the inner gate on a stretcher, his blood leaving a dark trail on the stone, his Genoese soldiers flooding after him like water through a crack in a dam. The section of wall he held, the most critical section, the stockade across the shattered Lycus Valley, stands empty now. The men who remain look around and see gaps where their comrades stood. They see the Genoese torches retreating through the inner gate. They hear the iron bolts slamming home on the other side. And then they hear something else, a voice they know. Constantine rides along the line. His horse is lathered, its hooves slipping on rubble and the bodies of the fallen. His armor is dented and blackened with smoke. Blood on his gauntlet, whether his own or another's, impossible to tell in the guttering torchlight. He has been fighting for 3 hours. He has not rested, has not retreated a single step. He calls out to the men who remain. Greeks, mostly, a handful of Venetians, a few Genoese who refuse to follow their captain through the gate. His voice carries over the noise of the dying battle, not shouting, exactly, but pitched with the kind of calm that only comes when a man has moved past fear entirely. Come, hold here, hold with me. They do not hold because they think they can win. They hold because of the way he says it, because he swings down from his horse and takes his place among them, shoulder to shoulder, sword drawn, shield raised. He is no longer giving orders from a tower. Not an emperor anymore. Not really. A man with a blade, standing in a gap in a broken wall, asking other men to stand beside him. Perhaps 200 answer, perhaps fewer. The numbers do not matter now. The stockade is a ruin. Timber and earth barrels and broken masonry, heaped into something that was never a wall but served as one for 7 weeks. Through its gaps, in the gray light before dawn, you can see movement, dark shapes massing, the gleam of armor, the flutter of banners you cannot yet read. The Janissaries are coming, 12,000 of them. The finest soldiers the Ottoman Empire has ever produced, held in reserve all night for this final hour. Constantine knows this. He has fought wars all his adult life, knows what 12,000 Janissaries will do to 200 exhausted men behind a pile of rubble. He understands the arithmetic. Has understood it since the beginning, really, since the first Ottoman tent appeared on the horizon, since the first cannon shot cracked the ancient stone. The equation was always the same. But courage does not answer to arithmetic. He stands in the line and waits. The men around him wait. They can hear their own breathing. They can hear the waves, even now, even here, the distant wash of the Sea of Marmara against the southern walls. Patient, unhurried. The city behind them is full of people they love, churches where their mothers pray, houses where their children sleep or try to, streets they have walked every day of their lives. That is what they are standing in front of. Not a wall, not an empire, just the ordinary, irreplaceable world they were born into. A messenger comes running along the inner wall, stumbling over debris, his face white. He finds the emperor and drops to one knee, too breathless for formality. The Curator, he says, the Turks are inside. Constantine does not flinch. He turns and looks north, toward the Blockerney quarter, and you can see it now, a Turkish flag, small and distant, flying from a tower that was Byzantine an hour ago. Then another. And another. They appear like dark flowers blooming along the wall, each one marking a place where the defense has broken, where the ancient stones have finally given way. The Curator, a postern gate so small you could miss it, bricked up for years, reopened during the siege for sorties, and then, in the chaos, in the darkness, in the exhaustion of men who had not slept in days, left open. 50 Janissaries slipping through, finding the inner passage, emerging behind the defenders like water seeping through the foundation of a house you thought was solid. 2 accidents, the wound of Justiniani, the forgotten gate, that is all it takes to end 11 centuries. Constantine mounts his horse. He spurs it down the enclosure, the narrow strip of ground between the inner and outer walls, and the ride is a thing you cannot look away from. The horse's hooves strike sparks on the broken paving stones. Torches burn at intervals, their light making the shadows leap. Men are running in both directions, some toward the fight, some away from it. The wounded crawl along the base of the wall, leaving dark smears on the pale stone. He passes men he knows, men he knighted, men whose children played in the gardens of the Blockerney Palace. Some of them are dead now, slumped against the wall with their weapons still in their hands. Others are fighting in small, fierce knots, 3 or 4 men back to back, surrounded, holding a stretch of wall that no longer connects to anything. The noise has changed. For hours it was the roar of armies, drums, horns, cannon, the massed voices of tens of thousands. Now it is coming apart. The clang of individual swords, a man crying out in Greek, another answering in Turkish. The thud of a body falling from the parapet. A world undone, one thread at a time. Constantine rides through it. His horse stumbles on a fallen timber and he pulls it up, steadies it, rides on. He reaches the place where the Turks are pouring through the shattered stockade, a breach 30 feet wide, choked with rubble and bodies, and through it an unending stream of men in white felt caps and chain mail. Their scimitars catch the first pale light of dawn. He dismounts. What happens next takes only minutes. But minutes, at the end of things, are not measured in time. They are measured in what they carry afterward, in the silence they leave behind, in the way people speak of them for centuries, softly, with a kind of reverence that has nothing to do with victory. Constantine removes his cloak. It is purple, the color of emperors, the color that has meant Rome for 1,500 years, from Augustus to this moment, from the Tiber to the Bosphorus, from a village of shepherds to the greatest civilization the Western world has known. The purple cloak, the double-headed eagle embroidered in gold thread. The insignia of the Paleologoi, the last dynasty of the last empire. He unbuckles it and lets it fall. The fabric drops onto the rubble, and the blood and the dust, gold thread, catching the torchlight for a moment before the cloth settles and goes still. He removes the jeweled clasp, pulls the imperial diadem from beneath his helmet, and drops it too. It rings once on the stone. Silence. He will not be taken as a trophy. His body will not be paraded through the streets of the conqueror's camp, dressed in the purple, displayed as proof that Rome has fallen. If he dies here, and he knows that he will die here, he will die as a soldier. Anonymous, ordinary, one more body among the thousands who gave their lives for this city. He draws his sword. 3 men stand with him. Don Francisco of Toledo, a Castilian nobleman who came to Constantinople out of something that was not quite duty, not quite adventure, but perhaps the purest kind of honor. The kind that crosses borders and does not ask for reasons. Theophilus Palaeologus, a cousin of the emperor, a man of his own blood, who could have fled and chose to stay. And John Dalmata, a soldier whose name the histories barely remember, whose life before this moment is lost. He is here, now, at the end. That is the only thing that matters about him. 4 men against the tide. Constantine springs forward. Not a charge, there is no room for charging. The space is too narrow, too choked with rubble and the fallen. He steps into the press of bodies and begins to fight. His sword rises and falls. He is 48 years old, emperor for 4 years, a soldier for 30. His arms are heavy. His breath comes short. The wound on his side, taken hours ago, forgotten in the fury of command, has opened again. He can feel the warmth of his own blood against his ribs. None of this matters, he fights. The 4 of them stand abreast in the narrow gap, and they hold it. For a span of seconds that feels longer than the night itself, they hold it. The Janissaries pressing forward meet 4 blades and 4 shields and something else. A ferocity that goes beyond training, past desperation, that comes from the deepest and most ancient part of what it means to defend a home. They kill, men fall before them. Theophilus takes a cut across the arm and keeps fighting. Don Francisco's shield splits under a mace blow, he throws it aside, fights with his sword in both hands. John Dalmata goes down on one knee, rises, goes down again. Constantine's sword breaks. The blade snaps, perhaps on armor, perhaps on stone, perhaps because steel, like men, has a limit beyond which it cannot hold. He is left with a hilt and a jagged shard. He uses it, drives the broken blade into the gap between a Janissary's helmet and gorget. The man falls. Constantine seizes another sword from the ground, a Turkish blade, curved, unfamiliar in his grip, and continues. But the tide does not turn. Tides do not turn because 4 men are brave. The Janissaries keep coming, pouring over the rubble and around the flanks and through every crack in the broken wall. Too many. They have always been too many. The emperor was lost sight of amid the crowd. That is what the historians wrote. Not that he was struck down, not that he was captured, not that he surrendered. He was lost sight of. The crowd closed around him, the press of bodies, the dust, the smoke, the gray light of a dawn that was not quite dawn, and he was gone. He and his companions fell fighting. 8 words, the last sentence ever written about the Roman Empire. 11 centuries from the founding of Constantinople to this moment. The line of emperors stretching back to Augustus himself, who stood on the Palatine Hill in Rome and looked out over a world he had remade. All of it, the laws, the roads, the aqueducts, the churches, the golden images on their walls, the libraries, the Senate, the legions, the philosophy, the art, all of it narrows to a single point: a man in a broken wall. A sword in his hand, then the crowd closing in and the light going out. The last Roman emperor dies as the first would have understood, on his feet, sword in hand, facing the enemy. He does not die for victory. There was no victory to be had. He dies because dying here, in this gap, among these stones, is the last honest thing left to do. His city is behind him. His duty is in front of him. There is no distance between the two. The crowd closes. The fighting moves past the place where he stood. Within minutes, the breach is a flood, 30,000 Ottoman soldiers pouring through the walls, filling the enclosure, surging into the streets beyond. The defense is over. The city is taken. And somewhere in the rubble, among the anonymous dead, the last emperor of Rome lies still. They searched for his body. Mehmed himself ordered it found. The conqueror wanted proof, wanted the world to know that the last Roman emperor was dead, that the empire was truly finished. Soldiers turned over the fallen. They examined faces. Stripped armor from the dead, looking for the purple, for the double-headed eagle, for anything that would mark a body as imperial. They found nothing. Constantine had done his final work well. By discarding his insignia, by stripping away everything that made him an emperor and becoming simply a soldier, he had made himself invisible. His body lay among the bodies of his companions and his enemies, indistinguishable. Just another man who had fought and fallen on a Tuesday morning in late May. A head was later presented to the Sultan, claimed to be the emperor's. Mehmed displayed it on a pike for a time, then sent it to various courts as proof. But doubt lingered. The identification was never certain. The face was damaged. The man who claimed to recognize it had reasons of his own for saying what Mehmed wished to hear. The truth is simpler and stranger. Constantine disappeared, not into exile, not into captivity, into the ground itself, into the stones of the city he had died defending. And from that disappearance, a legend grew. In the years that followed, the decades, the centuries, the Greeks who remained in the city, who lived now under Ottoman rule, who worshipped quietly in the churches left to them, who kept their language and their faith and their memory of what had been, these Greeks began to tell a story. They said Constantine had not died. Not truly. In the final moments of the battle, as the Janissaries closed around him and his sword broke and his blood ran onto the ancient stones, an angel had come down. Not the angels of the golden icons, with their serene faces and their folded wings. A different kind. An angel of mercy and of patience who understood that some things are not permitted to end. The angel touched Constantine and his flesh became marble. His armor fused with his skin, turned to stone. His broken sword solidified in his grip. His eyes closed not in death, but in sleep. A sleep so deep that centuries would pass like single breaths, so still that the roots of trees would grow around him without disturbing his rest. And the angel carried him down. Beneath the streets, beneath the foundations of the houses, beneath the ancient cisterns where water still gathered in the dark. Down to a hidden chamber beneath the Golden Gate, the great ceremonial entrance in the southern wall, through which triumphant emperors had ridden for 1,000 years. There, in the silent dark, the angel laid him down. The marble emperor. Sleeping beneath the city he loved. Beneath the streets where children play and merchants call and the muezzin sings at dawn. Beneath the layers of time, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman, Turkish, settled over the stones like sediment in a river. He sleeps through the rise of empires and their fading, through wars and plagues and the slow turning of centuries, through the sound of church bells being replaced by the call to prayer, and the call to prayer becoming as familiar and as old as the bells once were. And the legend says he will wake. One day, not soon, the legend is patient, as legends must be. When the time is right, when the angel returns, when some signal sounds that only sleeping emperors can hear, Constantine will open his eyes. The marble will soften. The stone will become flesh. The broken sword will be whole. He will rise and walk out through the Golden Gate and take back his city. It is a story, only a story. The kind people tell when the truth is too heavy to carry and they need something lighter, something with hope folded inside it like a letter in an envelope. Sealed, waiting. But stories are how cities remember. And Constantinople, Istanbul, remembers. Word count ~4020. Dawn comes to Constantinople the way it has come for 11 centuries. The light does not know that anything has changed. It touches the dome of Hagia Sophia the same way it touched it yesterday, and the day before, and every morning since Justinian stood beneath it and whispered that he had surpassed Solomon. The light finds the golden figures on the walls and kindles them, Christ Pantocrator looking down from the pendentive with the same calm, sorrowful gaze he has worn for 900 years. It moves across the water of the Golden Horn, turning it from iron to copper to the color of honey. It finds the roses in the gardens of the Blockerney quarter and opens them, because that is what roses do in late May, regardless of what has happened in the night. The light does not distinguish between one empire and the next. But the city beneath it has changed. You can see it in the flags. Ottoman crescents fly from every tower along the Theodosian Walls, from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn, a line of white and red where the double-headed eagle hung at sunset. The great gate of St. Romanus, through which so many emperors rode, stands open. The stockade in the Lycus Valley is gone, trampled flat by 30,000 men. The moat is filled with rubble and the fallen. Already the flies are gathering in the warmth of the new day. The streets are full of Ottoman soldiers, some still carrying weapons, others loaded with plunder. Bolts of silk and brocade. Silver chalices from the churches. Icons stripped from their frames, the gold and gems prized loose, the painted wood thrown aside. Books, thousands of books, manuscripts that had survived since the age of Plato and Aristotle, scattered in the streets, their pages lifting in the morning breeze. 4,000 citizens are dead. 50,000 more men, women, children are being gathered in the squares and the harbors, roped together, sorted for the slave markets. Some walk in silence. Some weep. Some carry their children and will not put them down. The churches where they prayed through the night stand empty now, or worse than empty. This is what the morning after looks like, not the morning after a battle, the morning after a world. And into this morning rides a young man on a white horse. Mehmed is 21 years old. He has been sultan for 2 years. He has been dreaming of this city since he was a boy of 12, when his tutors first showed him maps of Constantinople's walls, and he traced their outline with his finger and said, quietly, that he would have them. He planned this siege with the obsessive precision of a man who knows exactly what he wants. Drew diagrams of the walls by lamplight. Commissioned the greatest cannon ever built. Dragged 70 ships overland on greased logs to bypass the chain across the Golden Horn. Now he is here. He rides through the gate of St. Romanus. The soldiers lining the route cheer, but he does not acknowledge them. His eyes are on the city, the domes, the columns, the vast and ancient architecture spreading out before him. This is not the expression of a conqueror savoring victory, something more private than that. Closer to wonder. He rides to Hagia Sophia. The doors are open. The great narthex, where emperors once paused to remove their crowns before entering the house of God, is littered with debris, broken glass, fragments of marble, the splintered wood of icon frames. Mehmed dismounts. He walks through the narthex and into the nave, and the space opens above him like the inside of the sky. He stops. The dome soars 180 feet overhead. The golden images, damaged, smoke-stained, but still there, catch the morning light pouring through the 40 windows at the dome's base and scatter it in fragments across the floor. The columns of green marble and red porphyry rise around him, each one older than anything in the Ottoman world. The air smells of frankincense, 1,000 years of worship soaked so deep into the stone that no amount of scrubbing will ever remove it. Mehmed is awed. The histories agree on this. Whatever else he may have been, conqueror, strategist, the man who ended the Roman Empire, in this moment he is a young man standing in a room that makes him feel small. and he has the wisdom to recognize what that feeling means. He bends down and gathers a handful of earth from the floor, pours it over his turban, a gesture of humility before God. Then he speaks. He orders the building preserved. It will become a mosque, yes. The minarets will rise beside it. The call to prayer will echo from its dome. But the building itself, the walls, the columns, the dome, the space, will endure. He understands that some things belong not to the men who built them, nor to the men who conquered them, but to the thing itself. To the idea of a building that has stood for 9 centuries and earned the right to stand for 9 more. A sound behind him, sharp, rhythmic. An Ottoman soldier, drunk on victory and plunder, is chipping at the marble floor with the butt of his axe, prying loose a piece of the ancient paving to take as a souvenir. Mehmed crosses the nave in 3 strides. He strikes the soldier across the face. The man staggers, drops his axe, falls to his knees. I gave you the city's treasures, Mehmed says, not its buildings. The soldier is dragged out. The sound of the axe on marble ceases. And the floor of Hagia Sophia, cracked, ancient, beautiful, survives to be walked upon for another 500 years. Listen. The story does not end here. Stories like this one never end. They change shape. They pass from one form to another, the way water passes from river to sea to cloud to rain. They do not stop. The Theodosian Walls still stand. You can walk along them today, in the city that is now called Istanbul. 1,600 years old, scarred by cannon fire and earthquake and the slow erosion of rain. Towers crumbling, mortar cracked, grass and wildflowers growing from the gaps between the stones. In some places, the walls have been restored clean new stone, set beside stone that has weathered a millennium and a half. In other places, they are ruins, open to the sky, the old Roman brickwork exposed like bone beneath skin. But they stand. You can place your hand against them and feel the roughness of stone that was cut when Rome still ruled the world. You can stand where Constantine stood on his last night and look out across the same view, changed, built over, modern, and feel the ground beneath your feet holding the weight of everything that has happened there. Hagia Sophia still stands. Church, mosque, museum, mosque again. Each transformation a layer, each layer a chapter. The Christian images that were plastered over by Ottoman hands were uncovered in the 20th century, Christ Pantocrator emerging from beneath the whitewash, his gold-haloed face gazing down with the same expression he wore when the last Byzantine worshipper saw him by candlelight on the evening of May the 28th, 1453. The Virgin and Child in the apse. The Decies, Christ flanked by Mary and John the Baptist, their faces the most human, the most tender, of any Byzantine devotional art that survives. They covered them, they uncovered them, covered some again, and still the faces endure beneath their various concealments, patient as the stone they are set in. The golden horn still catches the light at sunset. The water turns from gray to silver to gold, to a deep, burnished copper. Reflections of the minarets and the bridges and the old wooden houses along the shore stretch and ripple and reform, the way they have done every evening for longer than anyone can remember. Fishermen still cast their lines from the Galata Bridge. The ferries still cross from shore to shore, engines churning the water the way oars once churned it. Gulls wheel above, calling in voices that have not changed since the city was young. The roses still bloom. Every May, in the gardens and the parks and the wild places where the old walls crumble, the roses come back. Pink and white and deep red, their scent drifting on warm air. They bloom in the courtyards of mosques that were once churches, along the remnants of the Theodosian Walls, in the gardens of the old Greek quarter, where families who have lived there for generations still tend the same soil. The roses do not know the difference between Byzantine and Ottoman, between Christian and Muslim, between the city that was and the city that is. They know only the returning warmth of spring, the long, patient instruction of their roots, reaching down through the layers of history to find water and mineral and the quiet sustenance of the deep earth. And the cisterns? Beneath the streets in the cool dark, the great underground reservoirs still hold water. The basilica cistern, built by Justinian in the 6th century, still stands. 336 marble columns rising from the water in long, silent rows, their reflections doubling them in the dark surface so that the space seems to extend as far down as it does up. The water is still. The light is dim, dripping echoes from somewhere you cannot see. If you go there, and you can, the stairs descend from a small building on a busy street, you will find yourself in a place that has not changed in 1,500 years. The same columns, the same water, the same silence, the same coolness on your skin, a sense of having stepped outside of time entirely into a space where centuries fold into a single, continuous now. The fish that drift in the cistern's shallow waters do not know what year it is. They move between the columns in slow, hypnotic patterns, their scales catching the low light, unbothered by the passage of empires, unbothered by anything at all. Beneath the city, everyone sleeps. This is not a figure of speech. It is as close to literal truth as any statement about a city this old can be. Beneath the streets of Istanbul, beneath the foundations of apartment buildings and shops and bus stops, beneath the ordinary machinery of a modern city of 15 million people, there are layers. In those layers, the sleepers rest. The emperor in his marble chamber. Whether you believe the legend or not, whether you think of it as a tale told by a grieving people or as something deeper, something about the way cities hold on to the ones who love them most, the story is woven into the bedrock. Constantine sleeps beneath the Golden Gate, his sword in his hand, his eyes closed, waiting for a morning that may never come, or that comes every morning, depending on how you listen. The soldiers sleep in the moat. Thousands of them, Ottoman and Byzantine alike, men who fought on opposite sides of the same wall and now lie in the same earth, their bones mingled, their enmity dissolved into the mineral patience of the ground. The moat was filled in centuries ago. Buildings stand where they fell. Traffic passes over them. The city has simply grown over its dead the way a forest grows over fallen trees, absorbing them, turning their substance into the substance of what comes next. The citizens sleep in the churches. Those who fled to Hagia Sophia on the morning of the fall, who prayed for a miracle that did not come, who were taken from the nave and sold in the markets of Edirne and Bursa, they left something behind. Not their bodies, something less tangible, a residue of prayer. An echo of all those voices, rising together in the dark, asking for help from the golden-faced Christ who looked down at them and could not answer. That echo is still there. Stand in the nave of Hagia Sophia on a quiet afternoon. Let yourself be still. You will hear it mixed now with 5 centuries of Islamic prayer. A different language, a different melody, but the same upward reach. The same human need spoken into the same immense and patient space. Layer upon layer. The city is a palimpsest. A manuscript written and erased and written over again and again, each new text leaving traces of the one beneath. Greek beneath Roman, Roman beneath Byzantine, Byzantine beneath Ottoman, Ottoman beneath Turkish, and beneath all of it, the bedrock, the ancient stone of the peninsula itself, which was here before any of them, and which holds them all with the same quiet tenderness. You can feel it if you walk slowly enough. Let your feet fall softly on the pavement. Let your mind go quiet. Beneath the noise of the modern city, the traffic, the voices, the fairy horns on the golden horn, there is a deeper sound. Not a sound exactly. A frequency. A hum. The accumulated resonance of 15 centuries of human life, pressed into the stone like a chord sustained so long it has become part of the silence. The sleepers hear it. Down in their dark and patient rest, beneath the streets and the foundations and the roots of the May roses, they hear the hum of the city they built and lost and built again. It is their lullaby. The sound of time passing over them like water over river stones, smoothing their edges, wearing away the sharp particulars of who they were, until all that remains is the simple fact of their presence. They were here, they lived, they slept. And the city sleeps with them, not all at once, never entirely. A city of 15 million is never fully asleep. But in the quietest hours, the deep middle of the night when the ferry traffic slows and the fishermen on the Galata bridge have gone home and the last call to prayer has faded, in those hours the city settles, the stones cool, the water in the cisterns goes perfectly still, the roses close their petals, the hum grows quieter, deeper, slower, until it is indistinguishable from the beating of the earth's own heart. And now you are among them. You have walked with us through this city on its last night. You have smelled the incense and the salt air, heard the bells ring and fall silent. You stood on the walls by moonlight and watched the darkness stir beyond them. Saw the candles gutter in Hagia Sophia, the golden figures fading into shadow. Watched a man remove his purple cloak and step into the fight and disappear. The story is settling around you now, the way the layers of the city settle around its dead. Gently, without weight, the way dust settles on a book that no one has opened in a very long time, not because the book is forgotten, but because its contents have passed into memory. And memory does not need pages. You are sinking through the layers, Byzantine and Ottoman and the deep bedrock beneath, through the sound of bells and the sound of prayer and the sound of waves that have been washing against these walls since before anyone thought to build them, through the scent of roses and incense and the cold, mineral smell of water in underground chambers where marble columns stand in rows like sleeping sentinels. Down, slowly, the way a stone sinks through still water, turning gently, catching the last of the light, then passing beyond it, into the quiet, into the dark, into the place where all the sleepers rest. Some stories do not end. I have told you this one, or tried to, the way you might describe a painting by candlelight, one detail at a time. One color, one face, one hand reaching out of the darkness. The whole picture is too large for any single telling. It always has been. The fall of Constantinople is not an event that fits inside a narrative. It is a wound in the fabric of time, and like all great wounds, it healed imperfectly, leaving scar tissue you can still feel if you press your fingers to the right places. But the city endures. That is the thing I want you to carry into sleep. Not the sorrow, though the sorrow is real and earned and deserves its place. The endurance, the Theodosian Walls standing, the dome of Hagia Sophia soaring, the roses blooming in May, the water in the cisterns, dark and still and ancient, the fishermen on the Golden Horn casting their lines into the same water where Byzantine galleys once rode at anchor. The city endures because cities are not made of stone. They are made of the people who live in them. When one people depart, another arrives, bringing their own prayers and their own bread and their own songs. The stones accept them all with the same silence. Constantinople became Istanbul, and Istanbul became one of the great cities of the world. The dome still catches the light at sunset. The roses still bloom. The water still washes against the ancient walls. And somewhere beneath it all, beneath the traffic and the ferries and the call to prayer, beneath the sound of 15 million lives being lived in the ordinary, irreplaceable way that lives are lived, somewhere beneath it all, the marble emperor sleeps. The soldiers sleep. The citizens who prayed in the churches on the last night sleep. The monks who copied manuscripts by candlelight sleep, and the fishermen who brought in the silver catch at dawn, and the children who played in the shadows of marble columns. They are all there, in the deep ground, in the quiet dark, in the place where centuries are no longer counted and the difference between one empire and the next no longer matters. They sleep the way stones sleep, which is to say, they endure, patiently, without complaint, holding the weight of everything that came after them, bearing it well. And now you are joining them. Your breathing has slowed. Your eyes are closed or closing. The sounds of this story are fading the way the church bells faded on that last night, one by one, growing distant, growing soft, until they are no more than a memory of sound. A memory of waves. A memory of a single bell, tolling once across a sleeping city. Rest now, you have earned it. The night is deep and the stones are warm and the water is still, and there is room for you among the sleepers. There has always been room. Good night. Word count ~4 480.